One nation bound with freedom, peace and unity.
Thank you very much. You are all welcome to the 2020 Annual Business Luncheon of the Capital Markets Solicitors Association. This event is virtual for obvious reasons this year, but we are most delighted and glad about the responses we've received in form of registration, the enthusiasm of our speakers, and lastly, the support we have received from sponsors of this event. The theme of this year's event is financial opportunities in the capital market and aid to improve the Nigerian healthcare sector. The events of the last 6 to 7 months, both in Nigeria and worldwide, has shown the weaknesses and wobbliness of our healthcare, particularly in Nigeria. I will not try to preempt the discussion of the day. We have for you today guests and speakers eminently qualified to do justice to this discussion. It's a full and well-packed of great speakers, people that have the required and resume to be able to do enough discussion and justice to this conversation. I'm sure that the discussion of today will go a long way in helping our healthcare sector financing. I wish you all happy listening, and we'll move on to the next item of the day without wasting much time by introducing to you the chairman of the CMSA, Mr. Benjamin Obidegwe, a partner of Hermon Law Practice. Sorry about that, just a slight change. The next person speaking is Ms. Ifeomo, partner at George Itomi and Partners. Thank you very much.
Standing on all existing protocol, on behalf of the Planning Committee, I am pleased to welcome you all to the 2020 Annual Business Luncheon, the flagship event of the Capital Markets Resource Association, themed Financial Opportunities in the Capital Market and Aid to Improving the Nigerian Health Sector. This premier event promises to be very engaging and a conversation opener, which serves to explore the financial opportunities available in the capital market to bridge the funding gap in the health sector. In addition, we are excited about this great opportunity afforded by digital technology in reaching a wider audience to hold a similar event, who hold a similar interest in the capital market operations. As of this morning, we have roughly about 1,200 registered attendees, as against our usual 400 to 500 participants at our past annual event. We decided this year that discussions will focus on the current climate in the Nigerian health sector following the COVID-19 pandemic and the role expected of the capital market in creating pathways in strengthening the stunted healthcare sector through easy access to capital in resolving the prevalent challenges against affordability, accessibility, liquidity, and funding. I encourage you all to sit back as we progressively engage with knowledgeable industry players across the medical field, solicitors and investment bankers, as they examine the current value chain of the health sector and how best the capital market can be utilized as a viable tool for the provision of better quality healthcare we all deserve in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ifeomo. The next item on the agenda is introduction of the chairman to give an introductory address. May I welcome Mr. Benjamin Obidegwe, partner, Hermon Law Practice. Thank you very much.
Alex introduced me, but you did not introduce yourself. Our MC is Adeleke Alex Adedipe, and his partner in the law firm of Duale, Ovia, and Alex Adedipe. Alex, thank you very much. The Director General, Securities and Exchange Commission, Dr. Lamido Yuguda, the chairman of our board of trustees, Senator Oladipo Odujiri, MFR. Our guest speaker, Mr. Olabode Augusto, members of our board of trustees, learned senior advocates and very senior members of the bar, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to formally welcome you to the 2020 edition of our annual Business Luncheon, ABL. This year's edition is unique as it's the first time we're organizing the event virtually. My ESCO and I are making history, though by default, as the first ESCO to organize a virtual business luncheon for our association. For those of you that may be attending for the first time, you may need a bit of background about CMSA and our ABL. The Capital Market Solicitors Association is an independent, self-regulatory association of solicitors and commercial law firms engaged in capital market practice. The association was registered in 2001 under Part C of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 1990. It also registered with Securities and Exchange Commission as a trade group. Every year, as part of an effort to develop the market and by extension the economy, the association organizes an annual business luncheon where topical issues are discussed by a team of experts and regulators. It is our flagship event, and it has always been a very rich and insightful event. This year, the COVID-19 pandemic exposed to a very large extent the huge infrastructure deficits that we have in our health sector, primarily because of lack of funds, the greater part of which comes from the government, both federal and state. As capital market operators, we resolved that we should use the platform of our business luncheon to draw the attention of the public to an alternative source of funding for our health sector, and that is the capital markets. This year's conference, therefore, is aimed at broadening the perspective of Nigerian health sector through discussions on access to financial opportunities in the capital market. To ensure that we have an engaging and robust discussion, we've assembled a team of highly experienced industry practitioners in the health sector and capital market operators to share their experience with us. I'm sure that by the time we are done, you will agree with us that the choice of panelists are indeed experts. May I, at this juncture, appreciate sincerely the special guest of honor, the Director General of Securities and Exchange Commission, Dr. Lamido Yuguda, for finding time from his very busy schedule to be with us today. DG, sir, we are very grateful. At the CMSA, we are ready to partner with you and your team to see to the growth of the market. I also want to thank our guest speaker, Mr. Olabode Augusto, and all the panelists for accepting to be part of this great event. We're also grateful to our sponsors, without whose support we will not have been able to organize this event. To all our members and all those that have registered to attend this event, we say a big thank you. I promise you that by the time you spend with us today will be worth your while. Thank you, as I look forward to seeing you again in our 2021 edition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The next item on the agenda is the welcome address by the Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, in person of Mr. Lamido Yuguda. Mr. Yuguda is a CFA charter holder and fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, with a BSc degree in accounting from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, and MSc in money, banking, and finance from University of Birmingham. He holds a certificate in financial asset management and engineering from the Swiss Finance Institute, Geneva, and a certificate in investment performance management from the CFA Institute, Charlottesville, Virginia, USA. Mr. Yuguda is an economist, banker, and investment manager with over 30 years experience in financial services. Please welcome Mr. Lamido Yuguda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that very warm welcome. Distinguished chairman and other executive members of the Capital Market Solicitors Association, CMSA, members of the planning committee of this year's business luncheon, members of the association, our keynote speaker, Mr. Bode Augusto, OFR, the panel of discussants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor and privilege to be invited as a guest speaker at this year's business luncheon of the Capital Market Solicitors Association. I'm indeed pleased to be part of the discourse today, as fora like this afford us the opportunity to collectively think and profile strategies to grow the Nigerian economy, especially in the post-COVID era, using the Nigerian capital market in particular. I commend the organizers for the theme of this year's forum, financial opportunities in the capital markets and aid to improving the Nigerian healthcare sector. This is interesting and apt, given the disruptions caused by the novel COVID-19 pandemic and the need to fund critical infrastructure as well as provide the needed private capital for growth and development. As we can all see, COVID-19 is one of the most unusual occurrences in the world's recent history. Most of our activities as human beings have been severely disrupted. Such disruptions arise from the direct impact of the pandemic on the health status of the citizens, the intervening impact of the various efforts to contain the spread and attend to those affected, and finally, the indirect impact on our socio-economic activities and performance. The Nigerian economy is also experiencing the negative impact of the pandemic. Nigeria's GDP increased by 6.10% in the second quarter of 2020, decreased by 6.1% in the second quarter of 2020 due to the low levels of domestic and international activities during the quarter, resulting primarily from the massive shutdowns necessary to contain the pandemic. The capital market has also not been shielded from this impact. For instance, the pandemic has eroded most of the positive gains that the market had in the early part of this year, with the stock market currently losing about 5% year to date. Similar trends have been observed in many sectors of our economy. Therefore, it is important for us all to be part of the solution to the current challenges. I'm sure such desire to offer solution is a major driver of today's event, the selection of the topic, as well as the speakers and panelists. I therefore wish to congratulate the CMSA and its members for organizing this program. A look through the profiles of the keynote speaker and the panel of discussants shows that we have all it takes, to really contain, this pandemic, through our various, interactions and also through our various, solutions. Speaking about the health sector, this is a very important aspect of our economy. Unfortunately, over the years, it has been grossly underfunded, and the COVID-19 pandemic has further exposed the crisis in that sector. I think more than ever, we now understand what it means to say health is wealth. The present pandemic is seriously affecting our ability to engage in the usual economic activities to earn income. Our health sector therefore needs adequate investment to build relevant infrastructure and manpower. The sector requires state-of-the-art facilities with capacity to diagnose and treat different kinds of diseases. Adequate support also needs to be given to the indigenous pharmaceutical companies and the health sector to carry out intensive research on drugs and vaccines for various infectious diseases. All these are necessary to reduce the health and social impact of future health emergencies, and also to discourage the rate at which medical personnel and patients migrate to countries with better healthcare systems. No doubt the type of development that our healthcare system requires will involve huge investment and capital from both the private and public sectors. It is also important that such capital is long-term, since most investments in the sector are expected to yield positive return over a very long time. Infrastructure financing all over the world requires long-term capital, which can be better obtained and priced efficiently in the capital market. The Nigerian capital market is capable of financing the country's infrastructure needs, particularly in the healthcare sector, using some of its various products. In addition to the traditional equities and debt segments of the market, there are also infrastructure debt funds that can be developed to target specific sectors like health. For the government, opportunities also exist to issue infrastructure project bonds in the Nigerian capital market. These are instruments designed such that the expected income from the executed infrastructure is securitized to ensure payment of bond interest and principal. Securitizing existing infrastructure can also unlock capital for further infrastructure financing and expansion. Using the capital market, governments at various levels can therefore harness private capital for healthcare infrastructure development, and this will further deepen the Nigerian capital market. There are many companies in the healthcare sector that have taken advantage of the long-term financing opportunities offered by the Nigerian capital market. Some of these include EcoCorp PLC, Union Diagnostic, Morrison Industries, Evans Medical, Fitson Healthcare, GlaxoSmithKline, May & Baker, Nemeth, Nigerian German Chemical, Pharmadeco, among others. I can assure you that the Nigerian capital market has the capacity to take even more. It is therefore critical that companies in the healthcare sector take advantage of the long-term financing opportunities in the Nigerian capital market. Governments across the federal and state levels can also optimize the use of the capital market through the issuance of, say, a COVID-19 infrastructure bond, or say a healthcare infrastructure bond, aimed at shoring up the level of healthcare infrastructure in the country. In order to support the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, the Commission organized the market to set up the Capital Market Support Committee on COVID-19 to raise funds and offer various forms of support towards combating the disease. The committee, on behalf of the Nigerian capital market, has donated many ambulances, face masks, infrared thermometers, and other medical equipment to the relevant federal and state government institutions fighting the pandemic. I'm glad to note that the CMSA contributed to the success of the committee's mandate. Going forward, the committee has announced its intent to develop a capital market-sponsored Nigerian Strategic Healthcare Infrastructure Fund. This is welcome, and I can assure you of the Commission's support for such an initiative, as we believe that more pragmatic efforts need to be targeted at developing our healthcare system. Let me use this platform to reassure this distinguished gathering of solicitors that the Commission is committed to developing and enforcing relevant rules and regulations that will further develop our capital market. We strongly believe that with robust legislations and regulations, the gains and opportunities in the capital market will be fully harnessed. Further, we are prepared to receive any necessary inputs and suggestions from the CMSA and other stakeholders that will help strengthen our regulation of the Nigerian capital market. We are equally working and partnering with other regulators and stakeholders in addressing issues that may slow down the growth and development of the Nigerian capital market. Our objective is to build a deep and strong capital market which will be attractive to investors, retail and institutional. To achieve this, we have set our sights at improving the investor experience by re-evaluating and redesigning our processes, using technology to achieve greater efficiency, and making it easier for investors and issuers to access the market. We'll continue to work to reduce time to market for issuers, improve the e-dividend process, and entrench good market conduct. We believe that without these, our market cannot get to where we want it to be. In conclusion, let me reiterate that we all face a common challenge, which is the challenge posed by globalization and the need to carry out a framework to gain and prosper, the need to work out a framework to gain and prosper from it. The current COVID-19 pandemic, with its dire consequences for our country, is also a wake-up call for us to truly and quickly tap into the many opportunities in the Nigerian capital market. If this is adequately done, we stand the chance of contributing positively towards our healthcare system using the capital markets. While thanking the organizers of this event for their continued contribution to the capital market, may I wish you all a fruitful deliberation at this year's Business Luncheon. Thank you and God bless.
Mr. Olabode Agosto is the founding managing director of the company Agosto & Co. He is a chartered accountant and has over 3 decades of work experience in both the private and public sector. Mr. Agosto was an assistant vice president in Citibank, Nigeria, in PwC, and a director general advisor budget matters to President Olusegun Obasanjo during his 2nd term in office. He was also a non-executive director of the National Pension Commission, PENCOM, the Nigeria Pension Fund, and a member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria. He's currently an independent researcher consultant. His research interest and speaking engagement covers politics, economics, and business strategy in key economies of sub-Saharan Africa. He has served as advisor to various companies in Nigeria. He's also a non-executive director of Agosto Company Limited and Guarantee Trust Bank PLC, as well as the chairman, advisory board, First Cardiology Consultants. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Olabode Agosto.
The chairman of the occasion, the DG Sec, Senator Odujiri. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I thank the Capital Markets Solicitors Association for inviting me here today to speak on how to improve healthcare in Nigeria and the role the capital markets could play in helping. I have decided that I will keep this address very simple. I will also focus on the big picture issues, particularly the operating model that we're going to use to deliver healthcare to Nigerians. Details are important. Indeed, they are crucial, but this paper has not dealt with this because of the short time that I have to talk. And I've therefore focused more on the big picture because I believe that if we can model something, we can of course build it. So the keynote address, this keynote address will address the following, will try and answer the following questions. Who are the key stakeholders in the healthcare sector? And what is of value to each stakeholder? How much will it cost Nigeria to have a good healthcare system? How should we pay for this? What role should the capital markets play in ensuring that we are able to finance healthcare? What role should the legal profession play in improving healthcare in Nigeria? Why should we bother to improve healthcare in Nigeria? The key stakeholders in the healthcare sector are the patients, the service providers. They could be doctors, nurses, other clinical staff, non-clinical staff, pharmaceutical companies, and other investors in the industry. The payers, people who actually pay directly for services. It could be insurance companies, it could be the government, it could be individuals paying out of pocket, it could be philanthropies paying for other people. Then the policy makers, government and the regulators. What do the patients really want? Patients want quality care at competitive prices and ready access to their medical records. The payers also want value for money and opportunities to invest their surplus funds in an environment where prices are fairly determined. Service providers, who are the employees of the industry, want professionally and financially rewarding careers, while those who are investors want timely payment for the services they render, and they want competitive returns on their investment. Government, playing the role of a regulator, will want products and services that perform and fair trading in the industry. Government, as a person who cares for its citizens, wants access for the poor and weak in society. They will also care about the future healthcare concerns of the nation and how to plan for them. These are the key stakeholders. These are things that are of value to them. But how much will it cost Nigeria to have a good healthcare system? In his book, Which Country Has the World's Best Healthcare System?, Ezekiel J. Emmanuel set out the cost of healthcare in 11 countries. These countries are the USA, Canada, UK, France, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, Norway, Australia, China, and Taiwan. According to him, the US spends the most, $11,000 per person per year. China spends the least, at just under $1,000 per person per year. If we take China that spends the least, China's average income per person is 5 times that of Nigeria. They are 10,000, we're 2,000. So if we were to spend roughly the same level as the lowest spender, and let's adjust for the differential in income, Nigeria will need to spend about $200 per person per year. This means $40 billion per year, or about 9% of our nominal GDP. It also means spending 16 trillion naira per year at current exchange rates. This amount is almost double the amount of money that was shared in the Federation account in 2019. Therefore, it is clear that government alone cannot fund it. How then do we finance this level of healthcare spending? In reality and in substance, only 2 groups of people are the ultimate payers for healthcare. Individuals and employers are the ultimate payers. Under one model, they pay taxes to governments, and which these governments then use to provide healthcare to the citizens. This is the model that they use in the UK, whereby they pay taxes to government, government directs the resources to the NHS, and the NHS will provide services. Under the second model, individuals and employers pay for health insurance, and these insurance companies pay for healthcare from the premiums that they have received. I have not seen anywhere in the world where the third model of paying out of pocket has delivered good healthcare system. And that's what most of us currently do in Nigeria. However, all this means that there is no free healthcare system anywhere in the world. It could be free at the point of receiving the service, but someone, somewhere, is paying for it. I believe that Nigeria should fund healthcare through a universal health insurance system. And the emphasis is on the word universal. Everybody must contribute into the pool, so that those who are sick today will be paid for by those who are not sick, and then there'll be enough critical pool of money to go around. Under this system, health insurance should be made obligatory for all Nigerians. Workers will pay their premiums largely through employer-sponsored schemes, whereby the employer will contribute something, the employee will also contribute something. Self-employed people will buy their own insurance, while the government will then focus on helping the poor and weak in society to buy insurance. The premiums paid to health insurance companies will thus create a large pool of savings to pay for healthcare. What role should the capital markets play in ensuring that we are able to pay for healthcare? In my opinion, the biggest risk that our pool of funds will face is inflation risk. This is because the long-term rate of inflation in Nigeria is about 12% per annum. Whether we take a 5-year average, 10-year average, 15-year average, 20-year average, the number we're going to get as average inflation for Nigeria is going to be around about 12%. This means that savings held in Nigerian naira and debts that will be repaid in fixed naira terms will lose purchasing power at the rate of about 12% per year. It also means that returns that we're going to earn from investing this pool of savings, net of the costs of the managers, must be at least 12% per annum to protect the buying power of our savings. Finally, premiums must also be adjusted at least annually to reflect the purchasing power of the naira. This means that we have to adjust our premiums upwards. And Nigerians like constant prices, but it doesn't work in an inflationary environment. The bulk of money saved to pay for healthcare would be invested temporarily in fixed income instruments. What does this mean in simple language? It means that we're going to lend the money to either the federal government, state governments, banks, and credit-worthy companies in the real sector for interest. Capital market regulators will need to help us set rules that will help ensure that those who borrow money from this pool of savings pay back as and when they fall due. This is usually done by setting risk tolerance limits and monitoring compliance with these limits. In the debt markets, interest rates are usually fixed using the principle of a risk-free rate plus a credit risk premium. The risk-free rate, of course, is the rate at which the federal government of Nigeria borrows naira. The federal government of Nigeria is the owner of Nigerian naira. They can tax us, they can print the money to repay their loans. So they are perceived as the safest borrower in naira. Credit risk is then measured using credit ratings that start from a AAA rating and to the bottom to junk of single C. And the market will attach premiums to the rate at which the borrowers in each bucket raise money. What happens to the purchasing power of our pool of funds if the risk-free rate is significantly below the rate of inflation? For example, the annual rate of inflation today is about 12–13%. The 1-year yield on government securities may be 3–4%. That difference is huge. If this situation persists for a considerable period, the purchasing power of the savings will be significantly eroded. Our capacity, our ability to pay for healthcare will be significantly eroded. If this universal insurance scheme is well managed, there will be a large pool of funds available to pay for healthcare, and this should increase effective demand for healthcare services and thus stimulate the supply side. If, for example, we have large amounts of money to pay for healthcare, then people will be encouraged to make investment in this sector and provide the services. These investors will also be able to tap into the capital markets to raise funds to partly finance their projects. The role of the capital markets can therefore be summarized as protecting the purchasing power of our savings and providing credit to investors in the healthcare industry. What role should the legal profession and indeed our leaders play in improving healthcare in Nigeria? Our lawyers will, of course, help us to draft the relevant laws and regulations that will guide the operations of the industry. However, it is important that the reforms that we embark upon in this industry should take the following key steps. We should step backwards first before we rush into solving the problem of healthcare in Nigeria. And I believe we should start by studying and understanding the operating models used in select countries where the impact of healthcare system has been very strong. But we should also determine how we should tweak these models to reflect the realities of our environment. For example, when we compare ourselves with some of the other countries that have strong healthcare models, we will see very clearly that our demography is different. The average age is totally different compared to those countries. The income levels are totally different. We must take all this into account to tweak these models to reflect the realities of our environment. Then we come up with a draft healthcare model for Nigeria. Encourage debate among these key stakeholders that we have identified. Let them debate and talk in a robust manner about this model. And then we take in the contributions from this debate to come up with a final model for Nigeria. When we now model something, then we can begin to build, because if we can model something, then you can build it. The lawyers will come in and help us draft the relevant bills and regulations and get them passed. And as we begin to implement, we further tweak the model to reflect what we see as we implement. Why should we improve healthcare in Nigeria? Life expectancy in our country is 55 years. And according to populationpyramid.net, less than 4.4% of Nigerians are over 60 years old. In countries where the healthcare systems are good, life expectancy is usually above 75. Building a good healthcare system also creates jobs, in big time actually. For example, the UK NHS employs 1.4 million people and is one of the largest employers of labor in the world. Finally, a healthy nation is a more productive nation. In conclusion, let us begin to dream now. Let us assume we start this universal coverage with only 10% of the population of Nigeria. That means that we have 20 million people paying on average maybe $200 per person per year. We create an industry that has an annual spending power of 4 billion. 4 billion is the equivalent of the annual GDP of Sierra Leone. If well managed and over time, it is able to raise coverage from that 10% to 80% coverage for Nigerians. Then we're talking of an industry that will spend 32 billion. 8 times 4 is 32 billion. 32 billion is a big number. It's half of the size of the economy of a country called Kenya. So, and Kenya's economy is one of the largest economies in sub-Saharan Africa. So this is big deal. If we get it right, we can transform healthcare. We can not only transform healthcare in Nigeria significantly, we will create jobs and we will improve the productivity of our nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for that thought-provoking keynote speech. Scary numbers, but I believe we can do it. My colleague now at the studio will continue with the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bode Agosto, for a well-delivered and thought-provoking address. Thank you very much. Just before we move to the next item on the agenda, we will use this opportunity to say a very big thank you to our sponsors of the day. I'll be calling out the names of the sponsors. Start with Aluko Anoibode, Babalaki and Co., Banwa Nigodalo, Bloomfield Law Practice, Duale Ovia and Alexa Dedikwe Law, George Itomi and Partners, Simon Coopers and Partners, Chris Ogubanjo LP, Stream Sowers and Co., Ayodele Olugbenga and Co., Pinuka Partners, Alliance Law Firm, Odujiri and Adefulu, The New Practice, Hemon Partners, and Hemon Barristers and Solicitors, apologies, Olaniwa Ajayi, and Alex Law. Thank you very much to these people who have made this event what it is today. The next item on the agenda is the next item on the agenda is going straight to the discussion session of the day. Our first session is Healthcare in Nigeria, the Practitioner's Perspective. To do this and moderate this session is Ms. Edefe Ojomo. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining us today for this session of the annual business luncheon of the CMSA. In this session, we are privileged to have three practitioners from different areas of the health sector. So we're spanning the different aspects of the health sector: pharmaceuticals, health infrastructure, health services, and insurance. We'll be discussing the different ways in which finance and regulation can improve the health system in general in Nigeria. On the panel today, we have Mr. Tokpe Adeniyi, who is Chief Executive Officer of AXA Mansard Health Limited, the leading HMO in Nigeria and a non-executive director of AXA Mansard Insurance PLC. He's a graduate of the Advanced Management Program at the Lagos Business School and an associate of the Chartered Institute of Insurance from CII London. We also have on the panel, Mazi Samuel Ohuabunwa, who was CEO, Chairman and CEO at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals from 1993 until 2011. He's currently a member of the Order of the Niger, an officer of the Order of the Federal Republic, and a recipient of the National Productivity Order of Merit Award. He's a fellow of the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, the Nigerian Academy of Pharmacy, the West African Postgraduate College of Pharmacists, Nigerian Institute of Management, the Nigerian Institute of Marketing of Nigeria, the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, the Institute of Management Consultants, and the Association of Corporate Governance Professionals in Nigeria. In addition to that, Mazi Ohuabunwa is president of the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria and the Association of Corporate Governance Professionals of Nigeria, as well as chairman emeritus of the Board of Trustees at Gregory University, Uturu. The last member of our panel is Professor Wale Suleiman, who's a professor of neurosurgery and spine surgery in New Orleans, Louisiana. He's board certified in neurosurgery, Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, and has completed 2 world-renowned clinical fellowships in complex nerve reconstruction and complex spine surgery at the Louisiana State University and the Medical College of Wisconsin, respectively. He currently runs a translational research laboratory at Oxnard, and he's currently a member of the So we'll begin the conversation today with Mr. Tokpe Adeniyi. And the panelists will be discussing the different financing and regulation in the different areas of law where they work. Now, Mr. Adeniyi will speak to us about what the biggest challenges are to raising access to healthcare across the Nigerian population, which is currently more than 200 million people. And he'll also speak to us about how financing and regulation can address those challenges. Mr. Adeniyi, thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity given to me to share with the audience. And I will stand on existing protocol. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, the DG of SEC. And thank you so much, Mr. Wode Augusto, for that excellent keynote, which actually summarized a lot of the issues around healthcare side, both on the demand as well as supply side. I think has made my job easy, so I could just discuss a few points that he has raised in addressing the issues that will improve the healthcare. I just first thought this morning, I said, as a nation, Nigeria, we have gone through this COVID season and it's been a very challenging one. And I just imagine that not only war can cause a problem in our country and tear it apart, even diseases can actually tear us apart. Just imagine if COVID-19 were to be carried by Anopheles mosquito. And all around us, we have very poorly treated water. We have unsanitized environment. And imagine that it's a tropical diseases. Then we're going to have real calamity. It's almost more than a war. And there's no better time for us to really discuss the need for us to be able to take important notes for our healthcare system. And I think this forum has given us an opportunity to be able to see the critical issues that we need to address and bring in the capital market into it. From the practitioner point of view, as health insurance company, we look at the healthcare problems on 2 sides, the demand side and the supply side. On the demand side is on ability to be able to fund the healthcare system, ability to be able to fund, because healthcare is expensive. And in the keynote address, we have already seen what other countries that have universal healthcare actually spend to make healthcare accessible to their people. If you look at what China has done $200 per person. Nigerian healthcare spent by government is about ₦1 trillion, which is just about 5,000 naira per person. It means that actually we're spending about $12.5 per person per annum. So you could imagine what $12.5 could actually achieve in the population. So certainly, healthcare is expensive on one side and it's underfunded on the other side. And we cannot have a good outcome until we properly fund the healthcare system. So the issue of financing is major on the demand side. And I will talk a little bit of those challenges. What are those challenges around financing? Why is this financing this poor? Why do we constantly struggle with financing the healthcare system? The first area that makes it so bad is the fact that the poor penetration of health insurance itself. Insurance penetration is very low. Less than 4% Nigerians have insurance of health, of one form of health insurance or the other. The government itself, federal government workers that is put on NHIS scheme, they just less than 4 million lives. And put together with private lives, we have less than 6 million people covered on health insurance. This is abysmally poor. So the funding is a problem because health insurance, the penetration is very low. Not only that, even the fact that the economic power of citizens is quite low. So it's very difficult for the people to bring so much money to be able to pay for their healthcare. And people wait until they are very sick before they turn up at the hospital, making the on-the-spot payment very difficult to do. And then already they would have become very sick and very expensive emergency cases that would not be easy to raise funds for. So that continues to put burden on the people because of the economic power. I also noticed that there's also a bit of, even the funding that the government gives onto healthcare, there's a bit of inefficiency in the way it's administered. Let's look at what the government spend in a year. Government spend an average of ₦1 trillion, both the state and the government. The federal government spend about 400 billion, the state government maybe around 600 million, maybe also local government, let's even give it at 300 million. If the government spend 1.3 trillion on the healthcare for its citizens, but the percentage of people who have access to this even government-funded system is less than 30%. It means that it's also, there's a bit of inefficiency in the way it is being structured. So you have some money that is very limited. It's also not serving the population of the people that is meant to be served. So we have problem with the structure. We also have problem with there is inadequacy in financing the healthcare spend, which the keynote speaker also talked about. So we do not have structure like healthcare premium financing. People have to still pay out of pocket. So if you have an insurance premium to pay 40,000 naira or 50,000 naira, an average household may not be able to pay that 50,000 naira at once. So where are the financing companies that be able to advance the customers with 50,000 naira to be able to pay for the premium and pay over a period of time? So insurance want to collect the money once, simply because they have to capitate and pay to the suppliers of services, to the hospitals. And so that continues to be a problem in having adequate financing for the insurance system, particularly in healthcare. The second problem I also noticed is the fact that the regulatory framework also has not allowed the funding to really be unlocked. So up until today, health insurance is still optional, it's not mandatory. For an economy to be able to witness a very well-structured health system, you have to make health insurance mandatory. It has to be mandatory across states, across the federal government, across the local government. Everybody must be able to contribute to the universal health care. So it has to start with the regulatory framework. Today we have an NHIS law that is still optional. It's optional for you to buy health insurance, so therefore it's not mandatory. If we begin to move towards the same thing that was done with PENCON, where all employers have to pay mandatory contribution into the pension fund of the employees, and also pay also on top of that, and then we begin to do the same thing similar to that for health insurance, where employees pay into health insurance, employers pay into health insurance on a mandatory level, and every worker has to contribute into it, you have a larger pool of funds that will be able to take care of the needs of the people. We also have the fact that there are low innovation also in the healthcare sector. So, every sector that is going to transform has to actually transform through innovations. So in health sector, there is low penetration of technology. There are very just upcoming technology that is only addressing a very limited portion. So we have upcoming gradually in our telemedicine that has not gained much reach. And when you do not innovate, you continue to struggle with a lot of archaic traditional system that will increase inefficiency, that will not make things to be easy to be administered, and the cost of healthcare will continue to rise. And so that's a major problem. And also the last point I will just mention about the challenges that have made it very problematic for us to have effective financing in the health sector is the fact that some of the suppliers of service that give us services like doctors, like laboratory scientists, like pharmaceutical, like nurses, and all the medical service provider, they do not have environment that is very comfortable for them and convenient for them. So there's a lot of migration out of the country. So we continue to have lower skill. We train great doctors, we train great people, but then we end up, exporting them out of the country. And that continues to weaken the health system and make even the people who want to fund the health system to continue to doubt whether they can actually put in their money into the system, because they are looking at, okay, so who's going to actually provide the care, who's going to actually serve the people? And of course, the list goes on and on and on and on. Some of the problems that we have in the healthcare system around primary healthcare is actually also dependent on the sanitation of the environment. So for example, if we're able to raise even $50 per life in Nigeria, the ability to curtail it such a way that the premium will not continue to grow skyrocketingly is to be able to also ensure that sanitation is very effective. Because if sanitation remains poor, you will continue to struggle with primary health care, and the major care, things like non-communicable diseases and the things that are actually chronic, will not be able to have enough attention. So the life expectancy will remain actually less than 60, and will continue to struggle like a vicious cycle. So we must never forget that the sanitation of the environment, the potable water access, is very fundamental into actually providing us an effective environment to enable healthcare system to work. And of course, then the funding mechanism would now become also very, very effective. What do I see as a way to actually overcome some of those problems? The first area I will talk about, what can the financial institution do, like capital market, like people who actually could lend money into the health sector. I think we can actually introduce things like, as we do for real estate REITs, where we have real estate investment trust, we can also have health investment trust, in which case where you have pool of fund that is made available, and that fund is going to actually be funding all the areas of the value chain of health system, from the demand side, consumable suppliers, manufacturers of pharmacy, drugs, consumable, because a lot of them are imported, and we need to begin to do them locally, and then we'll be funded through an EATS structure where you can have access to local funding, and they're able to develop, in a vertical integration manner. That helps us to be able to finance and also lower, the skyrocketing cost of, FX issues, because foreign exchange will continue to have a challenge on the economy for as long as we depend on having to import some of these things. So I see the capital market can actually introduce, an health investment trust funding that will be able to help every area of the value chain of healthcare delivery. The second area is that we can also do what I call innovative premium financing. We should begin to help customers to actually advance them premium so that they pay back without even actually knowing it. Just like the way, airtime on telco network, they advance airtime and people just pay for it. They do not even know when they are paying for it. So can we begin to innovatively advance fund onto health insurance system so that people don't need to pay out of pocket? Let people be able to pay, maybe it's 100,000 naira that is cost of the premium, and they are able to get a premium financing structure where they just pay over a period of 12 months gradually from either from their salary or from other sources of income that they have. Another way is the fact that, which is very important for us, is that we need to begin to organize ourselves and finance a PPP structure with the government. I believe that the private sector has a large role to play, particularly in capital markets. Government today is beginning to look for private players that will be able to join them to be able to do PPP, public and private partnership, to transform the clinics, to transform the primary healthcare center. Look at Lagos State is trying to do that with all the primary health care centers in Lagos State, in order to be able to enable it to function effectively. When private capital provider brings in the money, they'll bring in the culture, they'll bring in the management style, they'll bring in the efficiency, they'll bring in the discipline that is involved in running a business, and then they transform it. So quality increases, funding increases, things get better, and inefficiency is removed. So that sort of organized private structure in supporting the government to be able to run the facilities that are run there will really go a long way to be able to help things done. And on the government side, and particularly the regulatory side, which is where our lawyers they will really need you, is to be able to draft an effective law that will enable universal health coverage to become a reality. We need to make health insurance mandatory. We need to make it work. It has to be across state governments, and federal government and local government. We need to look at it such a way that, because healthcare is a problem, is not political, is not ethnic, is not religious, it's a problem for everybody. It's an area where everybody needs to really pay attention. We need to draft a robust law that will serve all the people, 200 million Nigerians. We need to be able to have a way of contributing to health system that is mandatory and that is equitable, that is fair, and that covers everybody from one end of Nigeria to the other. So the area of making health insurance mandatory is very, very key, very urgent, very important, and it has to be done very quickly. And also see the need for us to now, again, to begin to improve in the area of, introduce innovative systems like technology to be able to drive things more effectively. That way the government will be able to have access, because it becomes a pure regulator. We normally talk so much about the fact that government should not just be an operator and regulator, just like NHIS. We have always canvassed the fact that NHIS cannot operate and regulate at the same time. Effective regulation is when government focuses on the things that matter so that the citizens can actually get maximum value from the operators of this thing. And final point for me is that for all customers also, which a lot of our participants today were customers, is that everyone should get insurance. We cannot afford to wait for out of pocket to be able to pay for our healthcare. It's important for us to increase the awareness of getting health insured in order for us to be able to take care of our care. I will stop here so that we can have more time to be able to ask and answer our questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adeni. So we'll move on now to Mazi Ohuabunwa, and he'll talk to us about some of the important wins and losses in the pharmaceutical industry, particularly in manufacturing and distribution of medicine. And Mr. Adeni has referred to some of these issues when he speaks about foreign exchange, the foreign exchange market, when he talks about manufacturing and making goods available locally. Hopefully Mazi Ohuabunwa will talk to us about these wins and losses and the kinds of innovations that will help the sector to improve healthcare in the country. Mazi.
Yes, thank you very much, my dear sister. Good afternoon, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen on the panel. I pay my respect to the leaders of this capital market solicitors and to our guest speaker today, Bode Augusto, and to the chairman from SEC. I think it's a very wonderful opportunity for us to harvest ideas and make inputs into how we can change the narrative of healthcare in our country. So I'm so glad that it's not just pharmacists or medical doctors or healthcare professionals that are interested in how to raise healthcare. And as the previous speaker just said, healthcare is everybody's problem. But I think where to go back is to understand where we are with healthcare in our country. And I dare say that the problem is with our philosophy of healthcare. We had this penchant of adopting wholesale Western method of healthcare. And that has affected most things that we did because we adopted their methods and therefore we became dependent on them without trying to see how we could integrate our own traditional medical practice or healthcare practices. As I said in my first time paper in the School of Pharmacy, before the white man came with his allopathic medicines, our people got sick and they were healed. They had headaches and they got them cured. What happened? And when the white man came, we abandoned all that and went to adopt their model of wholesale and having abandoned that, then we have problems. We have problems because having adopted that, we now adopt their technology, we have to import their machine and equipment, raw materials. And so there was no local innovation. And the second issue, which I think has also affected the level of healthcare, especially the quality of life, is this misguided belief by some Nigerians over time, I think promoted by politicians, that healthcare is government's business. I think healthcare is individual business, and government's job is to coordinate it as a responsible moderator to ensure that resources are channeled from areas of greater surplus to areas of greater need. So I believe that this model that we adopted was led to insufficient funding. We didn't have sufficient funding for importing the equipment or the technology. We didn't have the sufficient funds to import raw materials. There's no local research because everything we're waiting for. I mean, now we're waiting for America and UK to bring us vaccine. We're waiting for them to bring us therapeutic for taking COVID-19. Everybody's looking out. When are we going to start looking in? I think that's where to change, because if we don't change this thinking and philosophy, we will remain in this situation no matter what else we do. Even if we have everything else, if you depend, your healthcare is dependent on external inputs 100% as we have today or more or less, you'll always have a security risk, a national healthcare security risk. So I believe that the other problem we have also is infidelity of government. Infidelity of government on labor issues, infidelity of government and detachment of leaders from local situation. I mean, we had a problem where our political leaders, from president to members of the National Assembly or local state assembly to chairman, if they had any problem, they traveled abroad. They caught a flight or an ambulance that took them to UK or US or Israel or Turkey or Egypt. And so they didn't care about what happened to us. They didn't know about the conditions of our hospital and our health institutions. I thank God for the honesty of the secretary to the government, Boss Mustafa, a child of God who now said that he didn't know that our healthcare was this bad, until he became SGF or this COVID started. I mean, he was honest, but that's the truth. And so we need to look at the purpose of healthcare intervention, which is to look at what is the end point, what are we trying to achieve. We must set up targets. Talking about life expectancy, but they talk about our life expectancy at the way it is level. What kind of life expectancy are we expecting? What kind of infant mortality, maternal mortality? What kind of disease burdens are we looking at? So there must be a proper planning, because if what we're trying to do, including the funding, is not based on a proper strategic plan that sets a vision and sets targets and objectives and how we can measure whether we're achieving them over time, then we suboptimize our problems. So how do we go about it? Especially coming from the point of pharmaceutical manufacturing, distribution, and all that. The first, as I said, funding is an issue. Funding is a problem in getting proper plants established. And plants these days must meet WHO GMP compliance. They are not just the kind of plants we set up 30, 40 years ago. They cost a lot of money to get WHO GMP compliance, not even pre-qualification. You spend billions of naira. And you can't do that with 90-day money, which Bode and some other guys used to help us get from the market. You know, now you have to get long-term funding to be able to do it. And that's why I think that the special funding focus, like provided by CBN recently, the 100 billion focus, is a good way to go. But the major solution is a universal health insurance, as was well elucidated by Bode. When I used to be a member of the board of NHIS. When they took some tours to Rwanda, to Uganda, to a couple of Kenya to see what had happened. I was shocked that a country that came out of war like Rwanda, in a few years, had achieved 80-85% of coverage when we were still 6%. I just don't understand it. So whatever is holding our country back from this simple method of universal health coverage, everybody paying little money, bringing a pool of funds, and this pool of funds will drive everything. It will drive everything, even the lack of funds for capital for building new plants, capital for reinventing, capital for innovation will come from this pool of funds, because that's the easiest way to aggregate funds. Some kind of crowdfunding helps to bring solution to this problem. And I also believe that capital markets will be useful in raising additional funding. I personally thank God that I had opportunity when I was CEO of Pfizer to NEMET. We had a lot of opportunity to do public affairs. We did both rights, we did primary, secondary, we did debentures, and it was mediated to the capital market. And today, our shares and stocks are sold in the capital market. So I think for manufacturers, for people in healthcare, they must think big, because we passed where smallness helps. You must think big to be able to compete. And the pharmaceutical area thrives on innovation, both in terms of raw material development, both active pharmaceutical ingredients and additives and supportive products, and also even in distribution, the logistics of moving products. I mean, if we get vaccines, fine, but how do we distribute them? Because you must use cold chain. And that has been a major issue even for the vaccines we use for the childhood infectious diseases that we have been vaccinating children from. How do we have the appropriate cold chain, the kind of cold vehicles? They cost money, and nobody has that money. And we're not asking government to go and do them, because government will not do them well. They have to come from the capital market or from the money market, and then be funded in a manner that they can be useful over a long time, because the shortness and the paucity of long-term funding has been an issue for us in this country. And finally, I think we need to improve regulation. Today, we have issues with fake drugs, we have issues with substandard medications, and we have issues with all kinds of people practicing what they don't know about. And I would wish that we regulate properly. Those who are private traditional medicine should please stay on traditional medicine lane. Set up a traditional regulatory mechanism and promote it. Because if you go to Ghana, it's been done. Go to China, they have both traditional and allopathic or Western. You choose which one. Each one is promoted. The workers are trained. In fact, in Ghana now, they have a degree in traditional medicine. So people are proud. It's no longer the type they do as if it was mysticism or all sorts of things that people didn't know what they were doing. Now it's the science of traditional medicine has become evident. I think government needs to set a proper regulatory framework, and our lawyers should help us to talk in that way and talk to the National Assembly, set a regulatory framework, train traditional medicine practitioners, then allopathic or Western medicine tradition. So when you go to the hospital, decide which one to go. That way, we will quickly enroll more people into healthcare, and our situations will be better. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mazi. We will now move to the last, but definitely not the least of our presenters, Professor Wale Suleiman. And Professor Wale Suleiman will speak to us about the current state of infrastructure and service delivery in the healthcare industry. And also tell us, based on your experience, what your opinion is on who should be responsible for financing critical aspects of health service delivery in the country, and what developments you would propose to leapfrog the current obstacles that we have in the sector.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's good to see all these familiar faces. Mr. Augusto, good to see you. It's been a few years. And Chief Mazi, good to see you. And the CEO, Axel Mansert, again, good to see all of you. I want to thank Capital Market Solicitors Association for this invitation, the DG of SEC, the keynote speaker, fellow panelists, and of course, the hostess for coordinating all of these. I think I speak from the point of view of somebody who has sort of been exposed to a few health systems. I trained in Eastern Europe. I was exposed to the NHS in England. I trained in Canada, and I worked in the United States for some time. In Nigeria, I've been in the private sector. I just finished a one-year term as a special advisor to the governor of Kwara State on health matters. So I'm trying to kind of synthesize all these in, I think I have 15 minutes and make some recommendations that I feel are practical and maybe helpful. So I think COVID-19, I was at the forefront of it, exposed the inefficiency, the indiscipline, incompetence, and I'm sorry to say the corruption in our system. And it was very significant because it actually forced all of us to witness it. Everybody from the poorest to the richest we were all victims of the health system we've created over the last few years. And so I don't like to delve on negativity, so I'll make my presentation in 4 different buckets. I think saying we should talk about infrastructure issues is too simplistic. The way I presented it to Kwara State, and this is the way I'll present it here, is that we need to talk about environment of care. An environment of care speaks to where people go to give care and where people go to get care. And I think because when you don't look at it that way, you focus on we need X-ray machines, we need ultrasound machine, that's not the full of it, the full story. Because environment of care speaks to when you go to work as a physician or as a pharmacist, as a nurse, you're going to work to care for people. And where you provide that care, you need to be able to have good infrastructure, water, electricity, the tools you need to be able to provide the care you're there to provide. And even aesthetics, things as simple as aesthetics, where you are to be able to have a clear mind to provide the care you need. And of course, with part of that is equipment. You need to be able to make diagnoses, have the right laboratory equipment. You need to be able to have the support staff that you need. And also you need to be able to confidently deliver the care you're providing, making sure you're guaranteeing patient safety and quality and affordable care. So I think that's critical. And for people that are going there to get care, I want to go into the hospital feeling that when I finish my interaction with the facility, I'll come back feeling better. If I get admitted, I will come out without complications, and I can go back to living my normal daily life and spending time with my family. If you don't have that confidence, even if the doctor is the best doctor in the world, the environment of care is not very welcoming, you would not be satisfied. And if the environment is fantastic and the quality of care, you have complications, you also not be satisfied. So I think we need to focus on that. In terms of environment of care, I think we also need to look at, in terms of potential solutions, again, based on my exposure to the system, I think public-private partnerships, all these gaps that I've mentioned, they're actually opportunities for investment. I don't see them as negatives. You should flip them on their head and say these are opportunities for either government to partner with the private sector and begin to bridge these gaps. I'm not saying come and bring, American standard healthcare, and those are very expensive. And because the more we try to mimic those standards, the more we import cost. Nigeria, we don't manufacture anything. That's part of why the cost of healthcare is so significant. Every time we import cost with it. So we need to be able to right size, right type, and whatever we want to provide. And if you're partnering or you're investing, you'll be able to do that properly. The other part for the environment of care is that I think if you look at United States, and I worked in the healthcare system in the United States, there are 3 tiers of healthcare. Even the United States cannot afford to pay for healthcare for everybody, for all the citizens. It's just not possible. And if you look at government-run facilities in the United States, which is a VA, Veterans Affairs Hospital, the military hospital, it's very inefficient. There's a lot of waste, and just governments all around the world just don't run hospitals very well. And I think I'll still wait for the day when you can, because of bureaucracy, because of inefficiencies, because of the system, the way the processes are done. So VA hospital in the United States doesn't work very well. It's good quality, but it's just inefficient. And you have Medicaid, which is for the poor and people that cannot afford. And you have Medicare, which is really for those people that are employed and they can afford better. And then for the people that are retired. And then you have the commercial insurance. So we can't think that we can just provide one heart fits all for the healthcare system in Nigeria. We need to tier even the health insurance system. I'll come to that in a minute. So we need to be thinking the health system that work in the United States very well are the private health system. So the hospital where I work, Ocean Health System, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, they're privately run, privately funded health system. They find a way to make it work. The margin on healthcare investment, even in the United States, is no more, it's probably maximum 5 to 10%. So I think it's just a different kind of investment when you talk about health. The second thing, we need to create a parallel health system in Nigeria, a private parallel health system that will compete and begin to show what's possible. The second bucket is this issue of healthcare financing, but I underline the word sustainable healthcare financing, because I think that we need to look at, they just launched health insurance in Kwara State. They're beginning to kind of learn a lot as they go through it. We need to right size, right type, and we know what are the top 10 diseases that affect our people. Unfortunately, most of these diseases are preventable. We need to see how we can ensure people to be able to to focus on health prevention and health maintenance. Because by the time a patient has a stroke and they begin to see someone like me, it's too late. It's a lot cheaper to manage hypertension, diabetes, and healthy living than to now come to intensive care and have a neurosurgery or a neurocritical care and neurology take care of you. So we need to be focusing on health promotion and preventative care. And maybe some of the insurance providers may need to reward people for some of that and begin to promote that. So sustainable healthcare financing. But in order to get there, we need to diversify and invite some of these private healthcare insurances. But what they would need is a legal framework that will make sure their investments are protected. In the US, we have these private insurance agencies that do $1 a day or whatever the amount is. But there's a legal framework that are protected, the institutions that protect the investment, and they are providing insurance to people that are very low income or poor people. So I challenge my investment and financial gurus that I think just like Mazi said, and I had this same mentality before, where you try to import the formulas and the commercial proposition that worked in the West. I think we need to look at a appropriate commercial proposition for our own environment, and not try to be all things to all people because of affordability and because of imported cost. Just like I said, we need to be thinking about how do we look at a primary healthcare center and not try to mimic a primary healthcare center in London or in New Orleans or in Los Angeles. I remember one of the experiments we were working on was, if you look at a typical PHC in Nigeria, I mean, the issue of electricity, if you have a solar panel, electrical source, they can have light, they have electricity to do maybe ultrasound, they have fan, all these things that like a microwave and fridge and all those things, the things that they need to do in those PHCs, if they actually do just what they need to do, it is not expensive to set that up. But when you look at the formula that we use now and the strategy we're trying to use, it makes them cost prohibitive. So we need to right size, right type, and really provide just what the people need, not more. So that's the only way we can make it is a Nigerian-made PHC that services what our people need. So that's sort of sustainable healthcare financing. I think the parallel private healthcare system that can do health prevention, health maintenance, go a long way to reduce costs and also try to avoid importing additional costs. And then the third bucket is sustainable health system. You see, a health program in isolation is just in isolation. I think that if there's no integration of a primary, secondary, or tertiary healthcare, you're just wasting your time. Because if a patient has a stroke and the patient is being taken, or a patient is having chest pain, and they represent to first cardiology, and Yemi Johnson is able to do a catheterization and do embolectomy, take the clot out of the heart, and the patient does well. And they've now gone back to Ogun State, but there is no connectivity between the clinic in Ogun State and First Cardiology. So they're not managing their blood pressure, they're not managing their cholesterol. They're going back to the old habit of eating bad food. What have you accomplished? Because there's no continuity of care. So I think integrated health system is very critical. And that one of the most important part of that is having an electronic medical record, having an automated supply chain, being able to manufacture some things in our own environment that we use, and also making sure that our processes and systems and protocols are in place so that we can have sort of quote unquote, this is how we do it, or maybe first cardiology protocol. Because if you don't have those things in place, it's very difficult to be able to manage costs, to be able to reduce waste, and to be able to be cost effective. So electronic health record, automated integrated supply chain management software, and also having the standards and the protocols and systems in how healthcare is delivered is very, very important. And then I think the other one is a purpose-driven industry partnership. A purpose-driven industry partnership. And what I mean by that, we need to be, again, try to migrate from this issue of trying to just mimic and reproduce what we've seen in New Orleans or what we've seen in London here in our environment. By the time you want to do investment, let's say in a neuroscience program, by the time you buy a CT scan and an MRI and all the other things you need, the cost becomes very high. So how do we begin to negotiate with some of these companies to look at where we pay for services and we don't pay for equipment? And we pay for utilization and we don't just empty our pocket just by buying equipment. And we make sure we develop a very good maintenance culture that will make sure the investment we've made is sustainable and is providing the services that people need. And not every hospital needs a CT scan or an MRI. We need to be able to look at innovative ways to do diagnosis without necessarily doing it the most expensive way. I think, again, I practice in so many parts of the world, because they have sophisticated gadgets doesn't mean they have good quality healthcare. I can give you an example of a cardiac facility in India, Bashedi, who is able to do a heart operation, same quality, good patient outcomes, comparable to American standards, but you can do it almost 300% cheaper. If you have a cabbage in the United States, heart operation in the United States, over $30,000, $40,000 to $100,000. This guy can do it for $5,000, same quality. Well published, very good Harvard Review study. So I think that we need to think how to, I need to throw the box away and really begins to innovate in our own environment. I think that so purpose-driven, we want to accomplish these goals. What is the best tool and most affordable tool to be able to accomplish the goal? And how do we partner with industry to accomplish these specific goals? So then the last bucket, which again I want to reemphasize, is health promotion and preventative care. Again, with all due respect to my the First Cardiology and to my own practice, I run a practice in Lagos. By the time again a heart attack gets to Yemi Johnson, or it gets to First Cardiology, or it gets to a stroke patient gets to me, it is very extremely expensive. We need to begin to focus on how to promote healthy living, how we manage blood pressure better, how we manage diabetes patient better, how do we make sure we focus on the way our people eat and the way our people health education is very critical, because that will reduce costs, that will make healthcare more affordable, that will improve lifespan. If we can even just find a way to get our people to know that hypertension is a risk factor for stroke, heart attack, to having a problem with your blood vessels in your legs, I think they will, and then we manage that better through an integrated health system. So the primary healthcare system that works, a secondary healthcare system that works, and a tertiary care system that is fully integrated. So what I mean to say by that, we need to bring healthcare close to the people, and the emphasis needs to be primary healthcare. How do we make sure that we now go back to the days when a doctor in the community actually knows the population of the patient that he or she is taking care of? And the nurses also knows. They can educate them on their diets, exercise, and make sure they monitor all those risk factors. And we need to, and lastly in this bucket, we need to innovate. If you're not innovating, you might as well just leave the healthcare field. Innovation is part of innovation is making sure we come out with a commercial proposition that works for our environment. That's part of innovation. We need to push telemedicine and digital health. We're pushing that with RNZ Global Limited. We're pushing telestroke, teleconsultation, and a few other things. But we need to innovate. We need to come up with a way to capitalize on our own traditional medicine and produce some of these medications that are being imported in Nigeria, in compliance with, of course, international standards, patient safety and quality. And if we don't innovate, we're going to be here again talking about the same thing next year, the following year. I don't think, and lastly, I don't think that if you don't have institutions in place to police what we're even doing now, universal health coverage in Nigeria will be very challenging. Look at what's going on with NHIS. So having private people involved, a parallel private health system, innovation through telemedicine and digital health, and focusing on preventative care and wellness maintenance, I think will be the way to go. And that's my 15 minutes. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Prof. We have more than 300 participants attending this conference today, and many of them have sent comments and questions after listening to the presentations. So I'll ask some of the questions to the panelists and look forward to receiving your responses. To Mr. Adeni, one of the questions is, aside from creating a legal framework for universal health insurance, what other issues do you foresee will affect the success of universal health insurance in Nigeria, and how do we tackle them?
Okay, so in addition to creating a legal framework and making everybody to contribute into the pool, we also need to pay attention to the data mechanism, and that's where innovation that Prof just talked about. We must invest into technology. If we are going to have a sustainable healthcare, data must be dynamically collected, analyzed, and be used to determine all areas of the delivery system in the value chain of healthcare. So data, must be a major issue around there. So technology must be an integrated part of the mechanism of delivery of universal healthcare coverage. It is going to be data that can be amalgamated, can be collected, analyzed with the use of modern tools, artificial intelligence, and all of the machine learning. You can then extract information that will be useful for decision making across the population, across demographic, across gender, across age group type, and that becomes a mechanism that helps in sustainability of the universal healthcare system. So data is an area. And also that capital markets should begin to fund health tech companies, technology-oriented, we are focusing on health. It should begin to fund, things that are innovative in nature to be able to sustain our healthcare system and lower costs on the long term. It will only sustain it on the basis of access. It will also lower costs on the long term.
I mean, obviously, the focus on technology is important when we think about innovation and innovative ways to address some of the challenges that we have. But one of the things that has come up over and over again in developing a contextual system in Nigeria that addresses Nigerian problems is the importance of traditional medicine. So Mazi talked about that, Prof talked about that. And a question here for Mazi is what capital market vehicle and perspectives should be deployed to assist the research and development for traditional plants and resources in the African society?
I believe that the critical thing is, first of all, we must have entrepreneurs who are interested in taking advantage in the traditional medicine or alternative medicine space, because capital markets cannot create money for people who don't exist. So I think what first is to perhaps see how we can promote, as I say, let government have a policy that promotes traditional medicine, that accepts it as a right way to do things, set a policy, set regulation, so that it's not, because anything that is come one, come all, you can't put your money and be sure you're going to get your investment back. So we need to set some regulation first, and that will create the enabling and promotive environment for anybody to put his money, including the capital market. Of course, the other thing that the capital market can do is to find creative ways to support this, both from the point of legislation, which I spoke about earlier on. There must be a legislation that says in this country, we have two healthcare systems, traditional, allopathic or Western, and they can run parallel, train a caliber of professionals who will do traditional medicine in a prescribed manner and don't veer into, because today some of the traditional medicine will add paracetamol or anti-diabetic to leave preparation and tell you it is working. So you don't know which one you're taking. And sometimes you get into overdose or some morbidity issues. So regulation is first, create the enabling environment, train the caliber of professionals that will run those systems. Then it will then become attractive for investment, both capital investment and even money market investment. So for me now, what I think the capital market should do, especially since I'm speaking to solicitors primarily, please join in the advocacy that we should get the National Assembly and the country to make it. They may have it a policy document somewhere, but that document is not known. And then put a regulation, a regulatory authority under the Ministry of Health, either under the Pharmacist Council of Nigeria or the Nigerian Natural Medicine Development Agency.
Hello.
Hello?
Okay, Mazi, we lost you for a few seconds there, but you're back.
Yeah, for a while, I'm back.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, can I complete?
Yes, please.
Can I finish?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can I complete? Yeah, so say that we, So we need to get a proper regulatory framework to allow the development of a business system. And I think there is an agency of government called Nigerian Natural Medicine Development Agency. I don't know whether anybody on this panel has heard about that agency, but I can assure you that agency in 10 years or 20 years and spend little money paying salaries, or the one who don't have, sometimes borrowing. You can't see the results of those kind of investment. So government should completely bring up this agency and make it effective, set a regulation so that we have a standard of practice, standard operating procedure, and then people can practice traditional medicine. Then you are going to get investors, you are going to get entrepreneurs. Those who want to do research will know that if they invest money in research, that will not be plagiarized, and not tomorrow another person will copy what they have done and say it is like this. I'm sure you've seen how they practice traditional medicine in Nigeria now. One thing cures all things. No verification, no authentication, no validation. So that's not the kind of thing capital market will put money to. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question is for Prof. But before we move to Prof, I wanted to just follow up on your point, Mazi, about the distinction between the traditional medicine and Western medicine, and the fact that they operate in parallel systems. But don't you think that there's room for collaboration between the two? And there's some kind of way we can have people use both for different things, for the same thing, but somehow create a synergy between these two systems.
Is that to me?
Yes, Matthew.
Is the question for me?
Yes, it's just a follow-up because you keep talking about.
Question to me.
Yes, yes, but I think this.
Hello.
Is
from I believe that's the. I mean that's. I think you're cutting, but if I got you correctly, can there be a collaboration? Is there a meeting point? Of course, there is, because there is. If you train the traditional medicine practitioners, there will be basic physiology, anatomy, the same things that pharmacists or medical doctors. You can have a traditional pharmacist, traditional medicine pharmacist, traditional medicine doctor. They get the same similar training, the basics. The difference will be, what do you use to heal? You know, whereas this one would recommend allopathic medicine, this one will recommend traditional medicine. And sometimes, even today, some doctors have patients and they transfer them to some other people because they find that the Western medicine is not working. They transfer them either to spiritual houses or to traditional medicine people, because there are some illnesses it's not in the textbook. And after you've applied all that is in the textbook, it just doesn't work. If you want to leave the patient to that, no. So I've seen some doctors who say, can you try somewhere else? So I think there'll be collaboration. The moment there is no inferiority complex, the moment we are not saying this one is inferior, this one is superior, I would treat them like, just make your choice. And there might be a clearinghouse in the hospital or in the health system that directs patients which way they would like to go. So there's a possibility for collaboration and not competition.
So if I may comment on that for 1 second, if you don't mind.
Sure, Prof.
So last month I was at a conference, the National Institute of Pharmaceutical Research and Development, and it was titled with phytomedicine training, and developing Nigeria's phytomedicine for a healthy population and assured economic prosperity. And some things that came out very clear. I was asked to speak on behalf of His Excellency about some of the feedback, some of the what they were displaying. It was very obvious that a lot of our people are very talented. They have good products. And these were the things I observed that were missing. When we actually went around, everybody was displaying the products. I think the first one is that they have not mastered the concept of how to commercialize their products. That's number one. The second thing is that they lack focus. They have a medication that works well maybe for back pain, but then they start including blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, everything. And then that kind of, when you're talking to me as an investor, I lose focus when I lose interest when you start saying something can do everything. So they don't know how to commercialize it. They don't know how to market the product very well. And what they're saying as if it's part of what the medication can offer, maybe side effects, but you don't emphasize the side effects. You focus on the primary function of the medication. The third one is that, and I think it's a system problem in Nigeria. I think we tend to kind of want to do top-down too much. We want to regulate everything. We want the regulatory bodies to dictate how things happen, whereas the regulatory bodies don't have access to what happens on the ground. They're in their offices in Abuja or Lagos, where there are issues that needs to be dealt with now. I'm not trying to say they're not important. They're very important. They should provide the framework, the guideline. What I got from that is that we need a simplistic, almost a spoon-feeding approach. These are the steps you need to take in order to make your product viable, not just for the Nigerian market or international market. to make it acceptable for that, because that's the commercial part of it. If it's not commercialized, it's going to fail. So I think if they don't, so what we need help from government and regulatory bodies is simplistic, almost a made for dummy kind of approach to make this be successful. And lastly, there's no competition. Whether it's Western medicine, whether it's local medicine, everybody just needs to meet the same standards and be able to compete and provide the care that our people need. So I just thought I would chime that in. Thank you.
Sure, and you, so so the next question for you was around these issues. I'll still ask it in case you have something to add. And it was, what would you recommend that the government do along with the private sector, to which you you belong to both though, to bring the traditional healthcare system into the mainstream in the same manner that has been done with traditional medicine in other countries? And make it relevant on a global scale. So you kind of answered that with your.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so if you look at hospitals, right? Some of the things that we're looking for is, how do we make sure we're known for something, right? If you look at Cleveland Clinic, if you look at Ocean Health System, we started as a cardiac hospital. We were known for cardiac care. If you look at, even in Nigeria, if you look at maybe First Cardiology, they're known for cardiac care. So I think part of what we need to do is to make sure that the people that are developing the traditional medicine, there are areas of focus where they say, okay, and they group together and they find a way for private investors, people that know how to standardize protocols and medication, authentication, all the clinical trials, that there are people, that's a whole field of investment that is untapped in this country. And if you do it in the most cost-effective way, I think it can go a long way. We talk about all these issues as if they're things that are insurmountable. Where those challenges are, I really see opportunities for investment. And the only way people shy away from them is because they're looking for the return on investment that people make of real estate or doing trades, or the healthcare investment is not like that. It's never going to be like that. It's not like that even in the US. In my organization, we always talk about no margin, no mission. And the margin we talk about is 5%. And that 5% can be billions of dollars, it can be billions of, so, but you need to be comfortable with what you're investing in and be in it for the long haul. So that's just something else to add.
Sure, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for your presentations and for responding to some of these questions. So I'm going to give one last opportunity to the panelists to speak on this very important issue and address. We've spoken about what the government can do. We've spoken about what the private sector, how the capital markets can intervene. And just one last message, just for Nigerian citizens, we have more than 300 people participating at this conference, and how we can also change our attitudes towards healthcare and invest in our own health, not just financially, but by attitudinal changes and just our own social behavioral contribution to healthcare in the country. We'll start with Mr. Adeniyi.
All right, thank you. I think my last word would just be to emphasize the fact that healthcare delivery is not just social, it is also a business before it can run on a sustainable manner. And so everybody must wear the cap of a business think in administering healthcare system, both the government side as well as private side, as well as the funding teams, capital markets. And there's a need for us to continue to train the practitioners, particularly the supply side, on having business practice, sound business practice in running their firms, because they can't even access capital without having sound business practice, which is also another challenge in the healthcare delivery system. So it's beyond, it's just not only social, it's also a business. Thank you.
Mazio Huabunwa.
Yes, thank you very much, Adefe. I believe that my message is that I've lived in this country for so long, and I still get pain that I was born into a third world country, and several years after, I'm still in the third world. I don't know what we're going to do. The time has come for us to take our fate in our hands. We need to be more aggressive in pushing for change in government, because we've for long left our fate to the hands of people who say they want to serve us, but they end up serving themselves. We should bring ideas that we all have spoken here now. We should form groups, form associations that can push for change. Because if we left it to National Assembly or the way the country is, we would just be going from pillar to post, going forward and backwards. I want us to move forward. And the way I think we need to move is citizens' power. Let Nigerian citizens, healthcare professionals, capital market operators, solicitors, we have more power than the few guys who are holding us in quotes to ransom. We need to push for change. Let this country become a better place. Let our healthcare improve. Let's have a better quality of life. Let us be regarded as other people from other nations. When you look at health indices and health statistics in Nigeria, the shame is that we always come in almost to the bottom. In every one you look at. If you guys are not ashamed, me, I'm ashamed, please. Let's see what we can do to see if we can solve this situation. Working together and pushing together. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Prof.
So I want to assume something. And the assumption that I want to make is that all of us, most of us that are on this platform, will probably live in an estate where there's 24/7 power, water, and if you look at how those things happened, it wasn't because of government. The government didn't come and put power in your estate. The government didn't come and put water in your estate. The government didn't do the road network. It was because some people came together and they said they want to live in an environment that is very comfortable. They want to live in an environment where they feel safe. And we have done so many things in this government in spite of government. If you look at this telecommunication, the wireless network you're using, is it provided by government? Your cell phone network, all the telecommunication, you look at movie industry, you look at private enterprise, Axamansat, one of the biggest companies in this country, it's not government. So I think I just want to encourage you guys that Nigeria has been surviving in spite of government. That doesn't mean that we should not fight for basic infrastructural needs, water, power. We need government to provide an enabling environment, but the rest of it, we must grab it and do it the way we have done it for our own living environment, for what we have done with our private business, what we have done with our own quality. And lastly, even if we have the best healthcare system, the healthcare system will go bankrupt if people don't take their health seriously. All you need is to have a stroke and all your ambition and all your, I want to be CEO, I want to be able to run marathon, that's it. So if you don't take your health seriously, even the best healthcare system in the United States cannot help you. So 30 minutes a day of exercise, or even 3 times a week, is all you need to be able to have a good health. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. And I think the future of Nigerian healthcare is bright. I'm not pessimistic at all. I'm very optimistic because of the innovation and the power of our people to self-motivate and do things that are needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you very much to all our panelists. Thank you for being a part of this luncheon and for your contributions to this session. Thank you to the participants for your questions and your comments. We apologize for those that we couldn't get to. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you very much, Edafe, and thank you very much to all the panelists in the last session, Mr. Tokwe Adeni, Mazi Ohabonwa, and Dr. Wale Sulaiman. The next session that we'll be going into And the last session for the day is financing, legal and regulatory perspective. Can the capital market pave the way forward? This session will be coming on in the next 2 minutes. And the moderator for this session is Kehinde Daudu, partner Babalaki & Co. In the next 2 minutes, we'll be looking at a short video clip of sponsors. Thank you very much.
Is anyone in the room, please? Is anyone in the room, please?
Hello? Oh, okay. That's fine. Hello?
Hello?
Don't put me on here too. Sorry. This particular session, as you're aware, is financing, legal and regulatory perspective. Can capital markets pave the way forward? On this particular panel, we have, I'll just give a brief run through of the profile of the panelists. Mr. Bola Onodele Koko is the Chief Executive Officer of FMDQ Group, a financial market infrastructure group with exchange, clearinghouse, and depository businesses. Previously in the banking sector, Mr. Onodele's career spanned across several banks in Nigeria with senior executive roles in treasury and corporate banking, which culminated as a chief executive officer of one of the banks in Nigeria. Is a gender advocate and a very, very vociferous supporter of the girl child. Welcome, Mr. Bola Onodele Koko.
Thank you very much.
Also, we have Ms. Ellen Charlie, is the Managing Director of Healthcare Financial Business Services Business at GE Healthcare across Africa. Our role is responsible for developing innovative, sustainable financing solutions for GE customers across Africa. Prior to joining GE, she worked in the investment banking industry for 10 years in both Johannesburg and London, where she was responsible for arranging funding African borrowers and projects across healthcare, power, mining, telecoms, and the oil and gas industry. She holds a Bachelor of Business Science degree in finance from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Welcome, Ms. Jali. I hope I pronounced it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person is Mr. Ike Chioke. Mr. Ike Chioke is the Group Managing Director of Afri Invest West Africa Limited, a leading wealth advisory firm with a focus on West Africa. Afri Invest is active in 4 principal areas: investment banking, securities trading, asset management, and investment research. He has over 30 years of investment banking experience involving strategic advisory in corporate finance, including mergers and acquisition, projects, structured finance, and debt and equity capital market activities. His industry specializations include telecommunications, media, financial services, and general industrial sectors. His professional experience cuts across renowned financial institutions, including Arthur Andersen, Goldman Sachs, Salomon, Smith Barney Incorporated. Mr. Chioke has contributed to market development in numerous ways, including his role as chairman of FSS 2020 Capital Markets Committee of the Central Bank, member of the Bond Market Steering Committee of the Federal Debt Management Office, and also the first vice president of the Association of Issuing Houses of Nigeria. Mr. Chioke holds a BSc in Civil Engineering, first class honors from the University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University, and attended Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar, where he graduated with an MPhil in Management Studies. Welcome, Mr. Chioke. Mr. Chioke, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Somebody muted me. I didn't realize that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The last person on the list is Ms. Olubumi Fayoko. She's known to many members of the Capital Market Solicitors Association. She's a senior partner in the law firm of Alukwanoye Body, a member of the firm's management board, and heads the Capital Markets and M&A practice group. Ms. Fayoko's career spans over 30 years, during which she has represented a highly diversified clientele of top-tier indigenous, international, and multinational companies in various sectors, including banking, energy, and natural resources, power, insurance, aviation, and healthcare. She has advised on very high-profile capital markets and M&A transactions and is currently advising on a variety of innovative capital transactions, including debt, equity issuance by supranational and corporate entities, and the demutualization of the stock exchange. She's the former treasurer of the Capital Market Association and played a pivotal role in the establishment of the Nigerian Association of Securities Dealers, NASD OTC market. Welcome, Ms. Fayokun.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We can see that we have a very, very robust panelist, and we're hoping that they will do justice to the questions that will be posed to them. The idea is to give them the questions and relate it to what we have been going on presently, and see how the capital markets can enhance and improve the healthcare in Nigeria and Africa as a whole. So I think I'll go first with Mr. Bola Onodele Koko. The very first one, that question is, what role can a platform like FMDQ play in incentivizing productivity and availability of healthcare services for a critical mass of the population? And how many, as a follow-up, how many pharmaceutical companies or healthcare service providers have assessed opportunities available for financing the FMDQ as of today?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and thank you to Capital Market Solicitors Association. When I got this invitation, my first instinct was to decline it because this was about healthcare industry, which I I didn't know anything about. But I then reflected and thought, when we have a revolutionary moment in the country, that period calls for revolutionary thoughts and ideas and a lot of things to do. So I decided to consult people that are in the industry. I consulted a Dr. Anderson, who was very helpful in providing me with videos, links, slides, and I read a lot about this industry. I also consulted Dr. Abiola, Dr. Ura Abiola, who is a consultant, and I'm also aware that she does a lot in the health industry. So I was very busy reading up till this morning. Last night, I actually slept on my notes and reading. And I saw that if we're going to start to support, FMDQ is going to support this industry, there's a lot to do. And that starts from understanding the issues in the industry. In actual fact, I would say in the country, and also this industry. And I read a lot and I saw a lot. So leveraging on some of the things said by the previous panelists, I think where to start is a lot of sensitization and education. People need to understand the place of healthcare and the place of their own health. I think number two will be what is going on in that ecosystem. I read to understand that there are three main boxes. You have the preventive, which is usually dominated by NGOs and government. Then you have the curative, which is where we have the private sector and public. And in Nigeria, public has sort of dominated that place, and the private is just starting. And then you have the rehabilitative, which is where we also have specialists. And again, it's been dominated by public, the teaching hospitals, and then you have private. But where to start is the private sector, which, as we heard in the last panel, is going to have to take over this mantle and deliver this quality of care that Nigerians want, working with the ecosystem, all the practitioners, the insurance companies, people and their practitioners and people going into this. I picked something from the last panel. Healthcare is business, and we have to understand that, and people have to appreciate that and know that those that are coming into this space, who we want to avail on capital market, understand how to run business. I heard one of the doctors in the previous panel mention that he thought EBITDA was actually the name of someone and didn't understand. So they go to the medical school, they're pharmacists, they're doctors, graduated first class, but nobody talks to them about business. And now they want to come into business. So I think for me, now with the little knowledge I have, if you ask me where should our platform start, I think our platform would need to start with professionals and we understand what to do. One, in working with the professionals, and two, in working with those of us who are buyers, who are going to be consuming the services of the quality and what we want. From the previous panel, I learned a lot about insurance as well. And it's amazing some of the things one, has done in the past, but you didn't actually know the major importance of it. Cash flow is going to be very important in capital market, whether you're tapping the private capital on the debt side or you're looking at the equity side. The business has to be well organized. The business has to pay back. The business has to pay return. Professionals have to be professionals. The business model has to be right. I mean, one of the videos provided was on a business in India, Narayana, and you could see how heart surgeries and the sort of hospitals are built. So the platform of FMDQ has been set up. We have an exchange which can accommodate PLCs. But what the board also did was that the board understood that most of the people in this space and a lot of sectors in Nigeria are private companies. So the board also approved the setup of the establishment of a private markets platform. That way to ensure that private companies can access capital and public companies can access capital. So if I put it in summary, there's a lot of work to do with the ecosystem on the things we have to do and how we have to set up this industry. I mean, I listened to the highly respected Mr. Olabode Augusto, and that paper I hope is going to be shared. We need to sit down and design what we want as the architecture in this space in this country. When we do that, and that is where I think FMDQ can start to support the market in organizing this, then we can start talking of capital. And I also agree with one of the speakers, one of the panelists, the private sector is going to have to sort this out. I mean, we listened to Mazi and all the things they did in Pfizer in those days. They issued the debenture, they listed on the stock exchange. Those are all the things we have to do. But the demand, we have to create the demand. And that's where I think the work is. We have to think of the quality. We have to think of access. We have to think of affordability. We have to think of scale. And that's where I think FMDQ can support the industry. And these are things we're doing in two sectors already. In the housing sector, we've been called to support that. In the debt capital market, we've done that. And I think that's where to start. Things have to be well structured. Things have to be well organized. The architecture has to be right. We need blueprint. We need strategy. And our philosophy has to be right. And I agree that government's role has to be regulatory. The government may not have the finances anymore. So we all need to think of how to help the teaching hospitals go into PPP. It has to be seen as a business, but we have to think of the people at the lowest rung of the pyramid or the ladder. How do we support them? It doesn't have to be expensive, but I think insurance will be important. Moderator, I think I've lost track of the second part of your question.
Okay, thank you. The second part of the question is how many pharmaceutical companies or healthcare service providers have accessed opportunities available for financing in the FMDQ as of today?
Okay, thank you very much. As I mentioned, we're not going to look at this as to how many has, but we should look at how many can. And that is what the organization has done in setting up a private market platform to democratize capital to almost any company in Nigeria. But in terms of PLCs, and with the work we've done a lot on the debt capital side, we've had one company in this space in Nigeria registered what we call a commercial paper program to fund its working capital. It wasn't easy getting that company to cross the line. It was a lot of work. which even involved the board because, again, of the challenges of that sector, but there was a lot of passion and interest by the board of FMDQ and management to see that we enable capital to this sector. And the way it starts is one person is able to cross it, and then you have other institutions follow. We have the credit rating agencies. So that is like the signpost that the debt capital market is ready to support this area. The private market platform is also ready to support private equity and for us to be able to showcase. So if you ask me, I don't want us to look at what has been achieved, but rather what are we positioned to achieve. And I think, as I said earlier, this is about revolution that we have to embark on in this country in almost all the sectors of the economy. But I agree with you. I think I must commend the association in putting healthcare as number one, as one of the things we need to look at. Because if the labor force is not healthy, then it cannot be productive. But I mean, there's a lot to do and to talk about here. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you very much for the incisive response. And from what you have said, we can see that the FMDQ is providing the enabling platform for private or these healthcare providers to access. I can see that Mr. Mazio Abua is still online. I'm sure you would have been consulting, knowing that he is very, very entrenched in this particular sector. I will go to Ms. Njali now, because following from my question to Mr. Bola Onodele-Koko, something one of the things I picked up there is that he mentioned something about tertiary healthcare, which is the teaching hospitals and all that. But the bulk of healthcare provision of health generally is actually at the primary level. So my question with respect to that is, are there models available to financing primary healthcare, knowing that this is where majority of the care is actually needed?
Yeah, we all know the importance of primary healthcare. We know it's the central strategy in achieving universal healthcare, quality healthcare for all. However, the allocation of funds are just not there. It makes such logical sense. It's the first touch point of any individual with the national healthcare system. It's in the community. It's customized for individuals close to where they live. It makes all sense. And I think in many African countries, including Nigeria, there is a gap. And the gap is, it is sometimes a little bit more attractive in terms of building a large 1,000-bed hospital, cutting of ribbons. It seems a little bit more important, but where the core of healthcare is really in the primary healthcare space. When it comes to attracting funding, however, there generally is a preference for large infrastructure as opposed to the primary and referral or primary care space. And as GE, we've invested quite a bit and have a dedicated team that's focused on that, because the idea is that you go into the communities, you provide them not just with the physical infrastructure or the equipment that we sell, but with the capabilities to be able to identify key risk items and to be able to refer to the tertiary hospitals or the academic hospitals that were referred to. So we know it's important. The priority just has not been there. In terms of how we've approached funding, we have had to rely on a lot of donor funds because private capital has been particularly missing in the primary healthcare space. So it's in partnering with the likes of the Rockefeller Foundation, partnering with the likes of Bill and Melinda Gates, USAID, in terms of them providing funding that they can make sure results in health outcomes, which is actually what we're trying to solve. When you're trying to figure out what you're trying to do, it's in improving outcomes. So we've done that in one sense, but there is this move away from trying to rely on just donor funding as a source of capital for the primary healthcare space. And what we've been looking at in many of our markets is, and maybe some of my colleagues might speak about it later, is around social impact bonds. How do we crowd in those philanthropic funds, crowd them in, bring in private capital as a result of them being in the picture, where they are willing to pay for outcomes, bring in private players that can provide the skills and capabilities. That sort of partnership, I think, is really the future of how we solve a lot of healthcare. It's not just government. It's, in trying to bring in those philanthropic players, getting the private sector players that can sort of benefit from those philanthropic funds being in the picture. And that's the way that we see, the move of healthcare funding in general, and specifically in the primary and referral care space.
Yeah, I would follow up that with Mr. Chioke, because Helen mentioned something about social impact fund. And I know that Mr. Chioke operates in that particular area. And maybe the question, as in Mr. Bola Onodele Koko would have a view on that as well. Bond issuance. Is it an option to healthcare, as in to providers in this space, to ramp up the provision to the populace?
Absolutely. Thank you again, Kehinde, for inviting me. Thank you to members of the Capital Market Solicitors Association for this privilege to speak at your luncheon. Yes, the bond market is actually quite open to a wide range of companies today to access capital. Like Bola mentioned, you know that FMDQ indeed has a platform for both publicly traded companies as well as private companies to access the bond market. If you're private, it simply means that you cannot market your bonds freely to all kinds of investors, but rather you can only market it to what will be called qualified institutional buyers. So you're dealing with institutions like asset managers, pension funds, and high net worth individuals. If you're a public company, however, it's more straightforward. And once you've done with your ratings and all the packaging that an investment bank like AfriInvest can do for you, then you can simply put it in the roadshow process. The market today is benign due to certain conditions created by our monetary policy masters. We found that the domestic rates are well below inflation. Today, inflation in Nigeria is trending at 13%. I think the latest data of August is 13.2. Whereas you have T-bills trading 91-day, 180-day instruments trading at around 2%. By the time you look at maturities about 5 to 7 year government paper, you're around about 5 to 6%. That means issuers can come in, even with a 500 basis point spread on top of FGN, you could potentially get into single digit territory. We've seen early this year, Axela came out and did an issue. It's a private company, by the way, and did an issue at 14.5%. Shortly after that, United Capital PLC, which is a listed entity, issued at 12.5%. So indeed, the market is open for issuers in the healthcare sector. It's a question of whether they are ready and prepared, because most of the issues, concerns will be, do you have the governance standards? Do you have the financial records? It needs to have audited accounts ready. And then we then do the ratings process and you get a decent rating and we could get you into the market. So from start to finish, if all the conditions are right from the issuer's point of view, and I think this market window is still going to be open for the next 6 months or even beyond, you could get liquidity from the market within 3 to 6 months. Depends on how prepared you are as an issuer. Now, if you then start going towards social impact bonds, then that's an interesting perspective from Helen. And I think that's also feasible. Looking at what has happened as a result of COVID-19, you've seen many Nigerian corporates and individuals have come out to donate money to the government to fight the pandemic. COVID itself is probably putting over 37 billion naira into various contributions. And if you aggregate what individuals have done across their states or their personal charities, it's probably well above 100 billion. And these are people that don't expect a return. Now, I'm actually working with the Capital Markets Association to see how you can formalize this arrangement in a manner that you can actually issue a social impact bond. Now, people get a decent return. They don't have to get full market return, but they know that this bond is targeted to provide some sort of permanent healthcare infrastructure if it's in the primary healthcare system or the secondary healthcare system, that can work. And that can then begin to create some of those kind of permanent funding vehicles that the healthcare industry needs urgently to get us prepared for the next pandemic. We shouldn't just do this because we have COVID-19, but we should do this for ourselves, because if everyone is healthier, then all of us are healthier. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, that's a very interesting development, and I'm sure the association will definitely take this up and will ensure that we drive it to a logical conclusion. I'll go to Ms. Fayop now. I wanted to know whether there are regulatory, legal, or regulatory impediments to provide for healthcare providers, whether they should be aware in trying, or as in that they should be aware in trying to access the markets, as in capital markets.
Okay, thank you, Kendi, and thank you to the Capital Market Solicitors Association for inviting me. I think that's a very good question, and in attempting to answer it, I think it's important that we assess where the current state of the Nigerian healthcare sector. Unfortunately, I didn't have the benefit of this morning's session, and so I hope I'm not going to be repeating anything that was said this morning. Essentially, the healthcare sector covers a wide variety of activities, including hospitals, pharmaceuticals, and diagnostic facilities. I don't think the issue that we're facing is a legal or regulatory issue, because we have a rich body of laws. We also have a reiterated version of the National Health Policy that was passed or that was issued last year. So I don't think the laws are the issue. One of the problems that we have in Nigeria is implementation and essentially following through on the provisions of and stipulations of legislation. So I've decided to approach the question from a much more practical perspective. As everyone I'm sure has stated this morning, our healthcare sector is currently in a deplorable situation. It's underdeveloped and it's grossly underfunded. So, how do we deal with those issues? If we don't deal with the funding issues and improve the sector, then I don't think we can even think about preparing new companies for accessing the Nigerian capital market, because investors want to invest in attractive investments, unless they're social impact investors or benevolent funds. Essentially, people invest in instruments and companies in order to make a healthy return. At the present, there are only 11 companies that are listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange out of 161 companies. And why, the main companies that are viable out of the companies listed are the pharmaceutical companies. Why are those companies viable? Because they have the requisite structures in place. A number of them have affiliation with global organizations, examples being GSK, May & Baker, Nigerian German Chemicals. So they've had the benefit of robust management systems, corporate governance systems. They have a proper understanding of their sector. But what we need to do is to try and extrapolate that into the other segments of the economy and into many more pharmaceutical companies, because they're not the only pharmaceutical companies. So we need to extrapolate that into those other companies that are looking to come to the market. So like I mentioned, it's important to examine the rationale for the success of these companies. They've benefited from best practice, international best practice, excellent performance records, robust management and corporate governance structures. These are all factors which make them attractive investment prospects, both for local institutional investors and foreign portfolio investors, such as the PFAs, the sovereign wealth funds, the mutual funds, private equity funds, and venture capital funds. So that brings me to what exactly the impediments are in the sector. And those impediments are the issues that I've just mentioned, which the companies that are looking to come to market need to surmount, and which hinder their ability to access debt and equity financing from the capital market. So these factors, like I just mentioned, are inefficient corporate governance structures, lack of ratings, inability to meet the listing requirements of the Nigerian Stock Exchange or the FMDQ, poor management structures, and the inability to render potentially good returns on investment. Another factor is limited knowledge of the Nigerian healthcare sector on the part of foreign portfolio investors. While there are myriad of these funds, these benevolent funds and social impact investors, there are also a myriad of investment opportunities that they're looking at. And they're not going to invest in a sector that is not well defined, not well developed. There are hospitals and healthcare facilities in Eastern Europe, for example, in South America, which are much more organized than the healthcare sector in Nigeria. And they would rather deploy their funds, even though they're not, strictly speaking, looking for huge returns, they would rather deploy their funds to those quarters. So we need to up our game, organize how we're going to make the companies within the Nigerian healthcare space a much more attractive investment proposition. And from my perspective, I think that we need to adopt a two-phased approach. So the first phase that I would recommend is that you invite as many of these benevolent funds as possible and social impact investors into Nigeria. Let them work with the companies that are looking to come to market and bring them to a condition where they would have a track record, have good governance, procedures in place, good management structures,
Hello, I think we've network giving us issues with respect to that. I'll go to Ellen. And the question I noticed, as in we've seen GE around, particularly in Nigeria recently. What has the experience been like in engaging with the government since the signing of the previous MOUs? Most recently, an MOU with the Lagos State to address health in 2018. There's a follow-up to that question, as in the B part of it. What is GE's approach as enabler in addressing funding shortfall and drive elements like rural healthcare solutions and funding startup healthcare practitioners?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I mean, on the first part around the MOUs, like most big corporates, we like signing the MOUs. We've signed a number of them, but we know that the real hard work starts following the signing and the big media presentations. And I think that's where we've been a bit stuck. Where there is the willingness, which is why the MOU is signed, there is the great intention, but intention doesn't get you anywhere. And so I think it's been kind of touched on at different points in time. There does need to be a willingness, not just from the people that are sort of at the top, but at the implementation level in terms of really driving the processes that can result in any real movement. And so I think that's where our challenge has been in terms of dealing with government. There's been some success, but I'd say that if we had things our way, things would have moved a lot quicker in terms of moving things forward. On your second question around, some of the solutions that we've had, and, there was a lot of stuff that I could relate to that's been said today around when looking at the private sector in particular, preparation by the private sector for whether it's capital markets or even just commercial lending. Our challenge has been, while we have great clinicians, certainly in Nigeria probably has, the best in the world, the business acumen element is often missing. So we've tried to fill in that gap by acting as an advisor and getting supporters that are willing to support companies that are starting up in the healthcare sector with business acumen, HR policies, account management, etc., because that's where, a healthcare business starts and ends. So by trying to bridge that gap, you really start to prepare them, not only just for commercial bank funding, but then, as they move on later on, it would be in the capital market space. The second thing we've done is, from a risk perception element, healthcare has not been seen as what I'd say sexy. There are other industries that have, and so there is a perception thing from a commercial bank, funder, investor, education point of view, where we do need to sell the industry a little bit better. And we have been doing the education ourselves, but also bringing in some of those development finance institutions, because unfortunately, as much as some people may consider them slow, they have long-term funding, very cheap interest rates, and they are particularly focused in funding healthcare. So we've tried to bring them into the conversation. One, to provide credit risk guarantees. So they could provide 50%, for example, risk guarantee to a local bank, and we have programs like that. And in that way, private sector healthcare players can access funding. They can also provide support in terms of credit risk assessment support to the actual commercial banks so that they can make better, quicker decisions when it comes to the healthcare sector. The other area, I guess, which we all know around government in particular, because you can't ignore it when it comes to healthcare, as much as, the private sector has to mobilize, it is in partnership with government, because healthcare is very much about the citizens of the country. And, PPPs are often mentioned. It's critical in terms of building major infrastructure and hospitals. We've done it in other markets. In most African countries, you get stuck around the regulatory element. People can apply to roads, they can apply to any other infrastructure. As soon as it's healthcare, things get stuck around the PPP element, but it still remains, a key source. It's something we've been driving. We've been trying to do sort of PPP lights, so to speak, where GE remains in the transactions over a long period of time and is able to crowd in long-term funding by virtue of providing maintenance service over a long period of time. I'm throwing around a lot of kind of ideas, but I'm very passionate about this area. There's, so many things we could do: blending financing, getting those philanthropic funders in, and getting commercial funding in, all to kind of work together to try and make our healthcare infrastructure better. So lots of sort of great ideas, but it's all around collaboration, because no one party can make and bridge this sort of healthcare infrastructure gap.
Thank you, Ale. I'll go back to Ms. Fire for now, because she mentioned two-phased approach. I think we got the first one, but because of I think the network, as in we lost you when you were explaining the second bit of it.
Okay, so what I was saying essentially was that by the second phase, the companies would have had the benefit of working with private equity investors. They would have appropriate governance structures in place. They would have a track record, and they would then be in a situation where they are ready to go to the next phase, which is the capital market. The mainstream capital market. So just like Coco said, a lot of preliminary work needs to be done in terms of preparing these companies to become, for their shares and stocks to become investment grade. So that's essentially what I was saying. So what I was, the point I was making is that there's a lot of preliminary work that needs to be done before we then move to the formal capital market sector.
Thank you. Mr. Koko, Mr. Odile, I'm back to you. I've seen many, as in one of the major things that runs through all this talk is one, health, as in the health sector generally. Yes, we've seen significant improvement, particularly with respect to pharmaceutical companies that are on the market. And as a result of their parent companies, maybe their governance issues involved. How are we able to get other facets of the health sector to that same level with the help of a platform like FMDQ? And possibly Mr. Chioke will give us a perspective on this as well.
Thank you, Kevin. You know, as I said earlier, we have to see these entities as businesses. So if you look at that ecosystem, you have hospitals, you have pharmaceutical companies, you have the diagnostic centers, you have the technology. Those are the major ones that will require funding.
Yes.
I've read that about $1 billion is what Nigeria spends annually on medical tourism. We're taking people to India, South Africa, and different places. If we indeed want to reverse that, if we indeed want to give Nigerians the quality of care that they deserve, then we have to see healthcare as business. As long as, I listened to Ms. Fayakun list all the issues. You can't attract money if you don't keep records. We can have you as a brilliant doctor, but you must have the mindset of business and understand that you're running a business, you need revenue. We can address the issue of revenue, and that comes from demand, and that comes from insurance, because people paying out of pocket, or they don't want to pay doctors at all, which is why they go to. I guess, look, if you say the pharmaceutical companies are making money today, probably they should be making 10 times what they're making if our people have effective demand in this country, if prosperity per capita income is better, because most people actually go to the chemist to buy the roadside, or this chemist on the street. That's why most Nigerians buy their drugs. They don't go to the doctors. They don't believe in the system. And that's why we need to have a session. When I say session, we need to sit down and decide what we want in this country about the healthcare system. The governance that you see in the pharmaceutical companies, as someone mentioned, was probably imported. The subsidiaries of big entities, and then they imported the governance. Nigerian entities have to take this issue seriously. They have to set up. FMDQ is a private company, or indeed, although it's a PLC, but when it was set up 7 years ago, the founders decided that it must have a high level of governance. This is how all these areas where doctors, pharmacists, doctors also in diagnostic centers have to understand that they're operating businesses, and they have to look for what do businesses want. You must have accountants, you must have records, you must be audited, your financial statements must be in place. As I mentioned, look, single digit is the rate for 10-year money in this country now. This area, this sector needs patient capital. If you ask me, I wouldn't encourage banking facilities at the moment, but for you to put a program together in the capital market and to be able to tap market, if 10-year federal government bond is at 9%, okay, what is the worst case of your credit score? Even if your credit risk is about 500 basis points more, additional 5% on 9 gives you 14. Then you can borrow at 14 for 10 years. That is patient. You can do a lot with that, but you must approach that sort of configuration with a business mindset. So yes, I'm a great doctor, but I need the mindset of a businessman. I need to set up this entity as a business, entity, and all the elements of businesses would have to be there. Your cash flows must be strong. So where will the cash flows come from? It has to come from demand. People have to be ready to pay. How do we empower people to be ready to pay? So yes, the pharmaceutical companies are making money today, has been published, but how many are they in the whole ecosystem? How many hospitals, how many diagnostic centers? How come we do not have a lot of technology companies? How many hospitals do we have that the records are, digital? There are major opportunities in this sector, as I've
So we can't hear Bola anymore. Bola, you're gonna. Okay, you're back.
Okay,
yes.
back.
Yeah.
So I think the host put it on mute. So I don't know where I stopped, but I'll backtrack a bit. How do we ensure that the entities have scale and they can attract capital? There's work to do there, and that's where I think we should start. I don't want to isolate the few 5 pharmaceutical companies that are making money at the moment, probably on the back of all of us buying vitamin C. Once COVID is over, what happens? This is a sector, if again we go back to read what Mr. Augusto presented, that can be a 32 billion sector. Billion annually, $32 billion of what we can do. I mean, $1 billion go out annually as we all travel. I mean, what's the point in us giving free education, almost free to doctors, and then as they graduate, they go abroad? Nigeria really needs to sit down and decide and implement whatever the strategy is, because it looks like we're wasting money. We develop people, they graduate, spend 2 years, they go abroad. But even if we set up this scale, we need to be able to bring back doctors and professionals in these areas, and we have to pay them good salaries. Gone are the days where someone is a doctor and you have social wealth and everyone thinks that's cool. The doctor needs to be well paid. The pharmacist will need to be well paid. The nurses, there's a lot to change in that sector. So you cannot expect someone to spend 7 years in medical school and is struggling to get mortgage, struggling to have a car, struggling. And those of us that manage to study economics are then looking like we took the right decisions. We have to look at our economy, look at our country, and take major decisions. It's the same thing with teachers. So if we're not going to let people have prosperity in the areas, then we're going to continue to have issues. We can even set up big hospitals and we don't have people to work there because the salaries and the compensation is not good. So I think we have strategic sessions to hold and then develop a blueprint on how we're going to change the fortunes of this sector and give Nigerians good healthcare and also prosperity.
Thank you. Mr. Chioke, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, let me share some healthcare statistics. I'm sure this is quite commonly available. But if you think of the number of medical doctors in Nigeria compared to, say, Germany, US, Brazil, South Africa, India, we are 37 doctors per 1,000. In the US, it's like 420 doctors. In Germany, it's 420 doctors per 1,000. 0.37 doctors per 1,000 compared to 4.2 in Germany or 2.5 in the US. Our total expenditure to healthcare expenditure to GDP is just under 4%, whereas Brazil is at 10%, South Africa is 8%. If you look at our health expenditure to per capita, it's even more embarrassing. We're just something like $10 per head, whereas South Africa is about $270 per head. So those statistics kind of tell you why Nigerians spend one of the highest in terms of out-of-pocket expenditure for healthcare compared to other countries, because we don't actually fund it enough. But do we have the capacity? Yes, we do. When I look at the healthcare industry, it seems it's similar to the problems we have in the petroleum downstream industry. We have crude, we can't refine it because somebody has imposed a subsidy. So we then export the crude and import the refined products, and we're forever suffering in foreign exchange. So here you are, Nigerians don't want to pay quote unquote for healthcare, but we're spending several $billions every year going overseas to India, to Dubai, to London, to the United States for healthcare treatment. And then the amount of money we actually spend out of pocket is also running in the billions, hundreds of billions of naira. Now, from an investment banking point of view, the most important thing you want to see is where is the cash flow? How can we aggregate this cash flow in a regular and predictable manner? That goes back to healthcare insurance. And it's possible for the government to mandate it and enforce it. The same way they enforced pension contributions, they can actually enforce healthcare insurance contributions across all spectra, rather than this whole idea of getting unnecessary levies for all kinds of government agencies. You can organize different sectors of Nigeria and make sure that each time you have an expenditure, whether it's recharging your phone or paying a bill, there's a little 1 naira or 2 naira that goes into a healthcare fund that then allows us to fund on a recurring basis those big projects like the tertiary healthcare centers, which are the specialist centers. But you can also come down and have a program to build primary healthcare centers across literally every polling, what do you call it? There's a word in the elections, it's not the polling unit level, but every political ward in the country. There are easily about 200 per state. You can build a primary healthcare center there, equipped with technology that's digital, that can give you information about the patients and their health problems. And you can then see when someone needs to go for secondary care or go to a specialist center. And those are the things that allow us to then create a financing program around it, because you can see predictable cash flow coming in either from government contributions or through taxation, or people then coming in to sort of buy social impact bonds. We need to layer all sorts of funding across different spectra, and then it becomes really an exciting proposition. And like Bola said, it's a business first and foremost, and the practitioners itself must also take ownership and recognize that the same way that an individual started a commercial bank, like Gemovia, and built it to become a huge financial, super warehouse, like Zenith Bank is today. It all takes governance and continuous investment. So people can also set up a hospital and keep on further investments and create the governance structure to allow it to become a real business that can attract funding. And the funding is available. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Farafin, we've seen the comments that hospital, for instance, and all this health sector generally has to be taken as a business. But there's the other bit about it that a large percentage of the population see it as a social thing for the government to do. How do we bridge this gap? How do we ensure that both the business end of it is, the objective for the business end of it is met, and at the same time, it's available and affordable to a large percentage of the populace?
Thank you. That's a very good question. What that essentially is the function of government health insurance, national health insurance. And like I said before, we have a rich body of laws. But the question we need to ask ourselves as lawyers is, are those laws fit for purpose? So I did sort of like a comparative analysis of the Nigerian National Health Insurance Act and the Ghanaian National Health Insurance Act. And basically, because it's the capital markets conference, I focused on the sources of funds, both from the Nigerian Act. It talks about funds. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So in the Nigerian Act, it talks about source of funds coming from the government and also from donations. If you go to the Ghanaian Act, permit me to read, because it's quite lengthy. Permit me to read what he said in terms of sources of money for the fund. So the sources of money for the fund include 2.5% of every person's contribution to the Social Security and Pension Scheme Fund. That's one source of income. Then monies allocated to the fund by the Parliament, that's government money. Money that accrues to the fund from investments made by the council. Then they go down to grants, donations, gifts, and other voluntary contributions. So basically, what they've done is to tie it to the Social Security Fund and the Pension Fund, and they've mandated a fixed percentage that must be contributed to the fund. As the Nigerian Health Insurance Scheme stands today, it's not funded, because the way it's worded, even though there's the intention to fund it and to set up some sort of a national health care scheme, it's on a voluntary basis. So people are not mandated to make the contributions. So it stipulates that if you have a minimum of 10 employees, that you may decide to set up some sort of a contributory health insurance scheme, but it's not mandatory. Given what we've gone through over the past couple of months, it needs to be mandatory. So there's no way you can have a healthcare sector, just like you rightly pointed out, that caters just for the elite. It has to cater for all segments of the economy. And for it to be profitable, monies have to be paid into it for all segments of the economy, not just for the elite. So we need to revisit that act, the National Health Insurance Scheme Act, and engage with the government and identify specific sources of funds that can be allocated to healthcare in Nigeria. It's critical, it's important, that we do that. Otherwise, the healthcare sector is going to remain in a deplorable condition and we won't make any progress. And maybe in 10 years' time, we'll be having the same discussion about how to jumpstart the healthcare sector of Nigeria. So there has to be a conscious effort to identify sources of funds that can be pumped into the healthcare sector. Just like there's an education tax fund, and monies. It's mandatory that you pay a certain percentage. I think it's 2% that you pay towards that fund. The same should be done for the healthcare sector, because you're right. It is a social service that needs to be provided. And one of the reasons why we have so many people falling sick, and we have much lower life expectancy rate than other countries, even African countries, is that the healthcare system in Nigeria is not fit for purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Ms. Njali. Do you have any comments with respect to this? Any further comments?
What I'll say, and I often have a lot of debates around national health insurance, and I absolutely agree there does need to be a stream of funds. But what gives people a confidence around contribution to a national health system is knowing that there will be an implementation phase such that there is infrastructure that they could use. So I think the implementation part is equally important. While you could get the contributions, if those contributions don't go quickly to creating the right infrastructure that is close to the community, that can be used by all, it becomes a challenge. I think we're going around the right path because that is the only path to universal healthcare. However, it needs to be both sides. The funding element, which is what the National Health Insurance sort of act will provide for, but equally, I think implementation is key. And in general, I think this is a collaboration, and where we all need to start thinking of, healthcare as much as we think about the mining industry, as we think about, the petroleum industry. Healthcare is somewhere where you could get the right returns with the right collaboration and the right focus in addressing a lot of the challenges that we've mentioned today. I think it's a very attractive asset class, even from an investor perspective. Those are probably my last words.
Thank you very much. I think we've even overshot our time. In the process, as in responding to all the questions, I think we've addressed some of the questions that came up from the audience. So we won't need to be calling reading out the questions from the audience at this moment. And at this point in time, I would like to thank all our panelists, Mr. Bola Omodeleko, CEO of FMDQ, thank you very much. We know we have taken you out of your busy schedules, and I'm glad that we're able to ensure that you conducted some research. Perhaps it will be an opportunity for the private sector to, as in, build a better platform, FMDQ platform for the private sector to explore. Mr. Ikechioke, thank you. I am aware that you had to dash out of your board meeting for this particular session. I will thank you for the time you spent with us. Ms. Ellen Jali, thank you for your time. I'm glad, as in, we're very, very grateful for your contribution. I want to see more of GE participation at the primary level in Nigeria. Ms. Fayokun, thank you always. We have benefited from your wealth of experience. I would say a big thank you to all the panelists, and thank you for participating in this particular session. That will be all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a vote of thanks and close of session by Mr. Chike Obiao, partner at Templars.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that introduction. I'd like to, on behalf of the trustees of CMSA and the EXCO, led by the chairman, Mr. Benjamin Obidiegu, say a big thank you to everyone who has attended. We had over 1,000 people register for this session, and it's been a tremendous success today. I have a special thanks for our keynote speaker, Mr. Bode Agosto, MFR, for the wonderful presentation he made this morning. We're also very grateful to our panelists, the panelists from this session and the earlier session, Mr. Bola Koko of the FMDQ, Ike Chioke of AfriInvest. We're very grateful to Samu Huabonwa. We're very grateful to Helen Mishali of GE. Very grateful to Bumi Fayoko of Alukwane Body. Very grateful to Chope Adeni and all the other excellent participants on the panel this morning and this afternoon. I also want to say a special thanks to all of our sponsors. Without their financial support for this program, we wouldn't have had the success that we've had today. Starting from our silver sponsors all the way to the gold sponsors, and then ultimately to our platinum sponsors. Okay, so thank you very much to Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors for their sponsorship. The law firm of Alex, we say thank you very much to you for being one of our gold sponsors. The law firm of Chris Ogumbanjo and Co., we say thanks a lot to you. The law firm of Banwani Godalo, our platinum sponsors, thank you very much for your contribution to the success of this program. The law firm of Odujiri and Adefulu, who are gold sponsors, we say thank you very much for your contribution. Next is the law firm of The New Practice. Thank you very much for being a gold sponsor. Law firm of Herman Barristers and Solicitors, we say thank you very much for your gold sponsorship. Next is the law firm of G. Elias and Co. We're very grateful for your support as a gold sponsor of this program. Law firm of Alex, thanks again for being a gold sponsor of this program. Alukwana Ebode, thank you very much for being one of our platinum sponsors.
law firm of Bloomfield Law Practice. We say thank you very much for being a platinum sponsor of this program as well. George Etomi and Partners, Platinum sponsors, thank you very much for your support. Babalaki and Co., Platinum sponsors, we also say thank you very much for your support. Ayodele Olubenga and Co., we say thanks also for your support to this program. And the law firm of Stream Sowers and Co., we say thank you very much for being one of our sponsors. The law firm of Olaniwa Ajayi LP, we're also grateful for your sponsorship. Simmons Cooper Partners, we're also very grateful for your contribution to this program. The law firm of DOA Law, we're very grateful for your contribution to this program as well. Alliance Law Firm, we're very grateful to you for your contribution to the success of this program. Now that sounds like the full list of our sponsors. There may have been some mix-up in the order in which we projected the logos. And if that is corrected before the program is out, we will go through the logos again. Otherwise, it's been a great pleasure having you all, and we thank you all for supporting today's event. It's been a spectacular event in spite of the challenges that the world is facing at the moment. And we're so grateful that we were able to proceed with this regardless of the challenges that the world is facing in terms of the disruptions, and also have dealt with a very topical issue in the midst of the health challenges that we face. Thank you very much, one and all, and see you all next year, hopefully in person at our annual business luncheon. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Mr. Obiawo, and thank you, everyone. Once again, and to reiterate, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, the executive, and the organizers of this event today, we say thank you to all the participants who've spent all their morning and some of their afternoon here listening to us. We say thanks to the panelists who's done a great job here with us today, and a keynote speaker, and also the introductory address speaker. Thank you very much, everyone. See you next year, and God bless. My name is Adeleke Alex Adedipe. Thank you.